need to prepare for a competitive event, our go-to company is the Army Painter.
Thanks to their complete range of paints, spray cans, and gaming tools, we're able to complete our new armies and units in no time.
When we need to elevate the quality of our models and terrain, the Army Painter is always our first choice.
You may not know this, but the Army Painter has sponsored more competitive events than any other hobby company.
Tournament and wargaming is in their DNA.
Visit thearmypainter.com to learn more about their amazing products.
And use promo code AWPaints for a 5% discount from your Army Painter purchases.
What are you waiting for? Discover the best way to prepare your models for events with the Army Painter today.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another super exciting Tier List Tuesday. We are back, and we are here to rank every single army in Warhammer.
And there's a lot of armies. And the meta has just changed. We just had a brand new MFM from Games Workshop adjusting all the points in the game. So the meta is ripe for analysis.
That's right. Every 3 months or so, they go through and they do some shakeups to the game. They fix some things that need some adjustments, and they shake up the meta just to shake up the meta. So we're going to be here, and we're going to kind of dissect all that information, the ups, the downs, the goods, the bads, and of course we've had some new releases upon us as well, with Orks getting their new codex released and previewed, Custodes, same thing, Necrons got some adjustments, Tau got previewed. It's a brand new world of Warhammer, and we're here to talk about it.
Absolutely, and usually with these things, there's a lot of discussion points to happen, so if you want to go ahead and be part of that conversation, definitely leave a comment below. Also, subscribe to the channel, and please do click that subscribe button. That massively helps us grow our channel and is a big boon. In addition, if you want to see some of the games played on this new balance patch, as well as other content analyzing it, check out the War Room, thewarroom.vhx.tv. There's a 3-day free trial. In addition, you get access to our international Discord community and our mobile app for iOS and Android.
Absolutely. We do 3 coaching games per week in there. We get access to amazing Discord servers with all of our coaches. We get Know Thy Enemies, 10-minute tips, strategy sessions, Jack theories, all kinds of content. We're constantly refining it, trying to improve it for your experience, all helping you learn the game and become your best. So if you're interested in improving at Warhammer 40k and just understanding it more, getting involved, definitely join our online community and check out thewarroom.vhx.tv. Again, there's a 3-day free trial in the link below. Nailed it. You know what else we're going to nail? We're going to nail this tier list. As always, folks, we are a competitively focused Warhammer channel, so we're going to be ranking all of these different armies based on how competitively viable they are. And this is not based on just win rates. You can go get those stats pretty much wherever on the internet. This is going to be like if you take the strongest player playing this army with its maximum potential, how does it shake up? There's going to be lots of factors like its place within the meta with everything else. There's going to be factors like specific matchups, but ultimately it's going to come down to like maximum potential.
Absolutely. So if you put this army in a top player's hands, how far can they take it versus the other factions? And that's what we like ranking our tier lists on. It makes it different, makes it unique, and we're going to bring a lot of our own experience to bear in this one.
And we're going to address some super chats like sloppity bile typer. Say that 5 times fast. With a $2 super chat, Orks is best. Why? Orks are definitely going to make a big appearance on this tier list because they are the greenest and the meanest, but we will get to them in due time. So let's start it off, Steve.
Yeah, so our ranking system, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so like we said, it's going to be based on top players and the factions in their hands, but we're going to go for the S tier, which is going to be the absolute best of the best. These are armies where basically when they hit the table, your opponent already has an infinite amount of problems. Yeah. This is an army that is too strong in multiple ways. Yeah. And it's something like that probably needs to be adjusted.
Head and shoulders above the rest of the field, and it's going to be what you expect to see at the top tables of the tournaments.
Yep. We previously had factions like Necrons up there, and you could see in their overall tournament win rate that they were a dominant faction. They received some adjustments. We'll see where they fit, but you know, S tier is this army is definitely getting adjusted in the future. It's happening.
So then we've got A tier. A tier is going to be below that, where these are strong armies, can definitely punch up, and if they're well played, can beat an S tier army that's maybe not played so excellently. They can definitely give the rest of the game some headaches and some trouble just on virtue of how strong A tier is. But largely A tier is a pretty strong but not broken army.
Yeah, usually A tier also has multiple styles within their own book, which means that they give the top player more flexibility for different metas.
Then we got B tier, which is going to be a solid army. It's got some fundamental problems versus specific factions, or maybe just like a weakness within itself that it doesn't know how to address. But largely it's a strong army that has some interesting builds within Warhammer and can do cool stuff on the table.
Then we have D tier. D tier fundamentally has issues.
We just skipped C tier?
Sorry, C tier, C tier. Sorry, C tier fundamentally has issues in which you can punch up. It's not easy to do. Player skill can bring you up, but at the same time, you're just lacking some critical resource that lets you have a very consistent, powerful game plan.
Yeah, you're gonna have to work really hard to beat up B tier armies. And
Exactly.
Forget S. It's not even in the conversation.
S, there's just a gulf in class
Yeah.
between the two.
And then there's D tier, which is truly the dregs of society. This is where we talk to Games Workshop and we're like, hey, please fix this. And hopefully they listen. But they've been doing a great job about that lately, and hopefully there's going to be a lot less appearances in D tier than they have been before.
Also, we don't get to talk to Games Workshop. That's true. We get to post these videos.
These videos are us talking to Games Workshop. That's what I mean here. We got a couple more super chats. We got tote bags for one who's been a member of Art of War for 1 month. T-Sun's Flamer's about to go burr. Yeah, T-Suns are looking nice right now. And Dragons of Dragons with a £2 super chat. I bet all my armies will be beer tier lower. Well, we shall find out.
Some might surprise you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, starting off, we're going to start with the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, and this Space Marines is going to represent all of the Codex chapters.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the Ironstorm, we're talking about the Gladius, the Vanguard, the Firestorm. So all the main detachments that you see, I'm sorry, Imperial Fist fans, and First Company Task Force and the ones that don't really get played, they're not really being counted in this, but it's going to be Gladius, Ironstorm, and Vanguard mostly. And whether you play them as the Black Templars variant, whether you play them as Blood Angels variant, doesn't matter. Those baseline Space Marine detachments, when you add in some of the other things you can get from other chapters, are fundamentally just extremely potent. Space Marines are a good codex that has multiple styles, and they are enhanced by the fact that they can access a bunch of supplemental rules.
Yes.
Which are very strong.
We're going to be basing all those other chapters that are not vanilla Space Marines. We're talking Blood Angels, Spacewolfs, Dark Angels. We're going to judge them based on their detachment and how their detachment works, along with their unique data sheets, because we don't want to just call them Space Marines. Understandably, you could play them as like a Gladius or something, and it might just be the best way to run that specific style of Space Marines, but that's not very iconic or true to its theme. So
and we've done that in the past, where basically we rank, like a Space Wolves, we rank it based on what its best detachment was, the Gladius, but it ultimately made the rankings a little weird. So instead, this time we're going to rank them based on their unique detachments that they have access to, and the generic ones, whether it's Black Templar Gladius, whether it's Black Templar Ironstorm, Blood Angel Ironstorm, those are going to be ranked by the Space Marine symbol here.
All right, enough preamble, let's get into it. Space Marines. They got some points reductions, they got some price hikes. Eliminators went up a little bit, and that's mostly to be a little bit of an annoyance to the Eliminator Impulsor trick. You want to explain that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was something that you were seeing pretty often, where you can get 2 units of Eliminators inside an Impulsor. So they pop out, they shoot, they then use their ability to get back in the transport, then the transport activates and uses the weapons inside, and so you could basically activate twice. Obviously that probably needs a little bit of a rules FAQ, but that's probably the main reason they went up. Now, of the main Space Marine chapters that were performing well, we have Black Templars Ironstorm, we had a Blood Angels variant of it, we had Black Templars Gladius that was performing very well, and all of these, especially the Black Templar side of things, increased a decent amount in points.
Right.
Not significantly. A lot of their vehicles gain multi-meltas for free. They were paying like a 5-point increase for that. Now I believe it is a 10-point increase for having an extra multi-melta, which is totally reasonable. But they still have some of the best vehicles in the Space Marine corpus.
And some other vehicles came down, so it's not just like you take the list as it was, it got slapped with some points, life is sad. You get a plethora of data sheets within Space Marine, so now you just choose some different ones and kind of make it work. I really like the latest threads coming down to 160. I always thought they were great already, and then Vindicators at 175.
That's the Brutalis.
Brutalis.
The Brutalis, the combat one, which does actually make it quite competitive now.
Okay, that definitely helps. The combat trad I'm not as nifty on, but the 175 Vindicators, can we talk about that? I was eyeing them up at 190.
Yeah, I mean, John was, and he was starting to build them up already, and now all of a sudden they got a nice decrease. They're 175 for a T11 2-up save. You can give Armor of Contempt, you give it Smoke. It's actually very annoying to kill. And now you can quite easily, you drop a gladiator tank here, you drop a gladiator there, and then you just add 2 vindicators, and you're like, totally, I'm feeling great.
And assault jump intercessors at 80 points for 5. Like, now you're making sisters look expensive. Like, what are we talking about? That is so cheap for a jump infantry model.
One of the great things about them is Space Marines are one of the armies that love spamming the grenades stratagem, and gaining access to these assault intercessors, these jump pack assault intercessors, gives you charge mortals. So you can actually build a Space Marine list that does quite a bit of mortal wound output. I think while this is a slight downgrade for Ironstorm, there are 2 main enhancements went up in points. It's still, they're a very strong sub-faction, and they have new options now, and I think we're going to see those. So personally, I'm leaning very much towards this is definitely an A-tier faction.
Yeah, I think Space Marines are just super strong. They got a little bit of side grades in some places, a little bit of nerfs here, a little bit of buffs there, but largely speaking, Gladius is still awesome, Vanguard is still great, Ironstorm is really good. I just played against Triple Land Raider Firestorm. Like, they have builds upon builds upon builds, so much codex depth and diversity. It's really healthy, it's really strong. It's not broken. They're definitely not just the menace of the meta, but they are a very strong A-tier contender.
Yeah, and if you're thinking, hey, Space Marines, the generic codex has a 43% win rate, and the issue there is because a lot of Space Marine players end up taking the Black Templar variant, the Blood Angels variant, the other variants that exist out there, and so dedicated hardcore Space Marine players that want to play some of the other detachments are basically making up a lot of that data, whereas the top players are taking these other Space Marine supplements, but using the codex chapter detachments.
So I think that's a great place to just kind of leave Space Marines to start us off in A tier. And then we've got a $5 super chat from Adobo. I know Art of War is a competitive channel, but I'd love your take on army ranking for a more casual Dadhammer environment. Well, Adobo, we are definitely trying to get more into the different types of enjoyments for Warhammer, not just being a competitive focus channel. Of course, that's our DNA and our bread and butter, but we love all kinds of Warhammer, and we encourage everybody with whatever types of enjoyment they have to get into it. So we're definitely going to be looking to make some more content, stay on the lookout for shorts and things like that, and maybe we'll even start doing some videos that are more catered to the more casual-minded Warhammer player.
Absolutely, because the thing is, the more accessible competitive 40k is, the better for all of us, because the game gets more popular, tournaments get more popular, Games Workshop decides to continue putting more and more support into the rules. It's a continuing cycle, so all that massively helps grow the 40k community.
Beautiful. So let's keep on rolling. Looks like next up we've got the Chaos Knights.
Chaos Knights. So this is an army that has stayed pretty close to 50% throughout most of the edition. Their main build is running anywhere between, I think it's 11 to 13 or so War Dogs.
Yeah,
mostly
it really depends how much demons you want to run as allies.
Exactly, whether you want to fit those Nurgle demons in there or not. But effectively, you're looking at 5-6 brigands, 3-4 carnivores, maybe a stalker in there to be your character. And sometimes you see huntsmen for the extra multi-melters. They're very good into Catan, for instance, or just help the redundancy there.
I'm a big fan of just straight 6 carnivores. You know, I think the combat's great.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of ways you can slice the cake. You don't see the big knights too, unfortunately. The Abominant, the Rampager, we've tried them. Other players have tried them. It's not that they are bad, it's simply that they are just not as good as the equivalent of 3 more individual War Dogs.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of points for one body when you can just have more of the same.
And on the other hand, there's a lot of armies that have dedicated units, specialist units like Eradicators, that are super good at picking up one durable vehicle.
Yeah.
Whereas picking up 3 of them, that stresses the opponent out a lot.
Unfortunately, at the competitive level, Chaos Knights basically has 2 functional play styles. One is kind of a stat check, in which you just deliver these 12 War Dogs and just push your opponent around, and hopefully between shooting and combat you murder them. That's one of their more common ways of approach. It is not the strongest stat check in Army. It's pretty average middling in terms of how statty it is, if you will. So I think you get those kind of average results out of that. The other way to play Chaos Knights is more of a control style, because they have an amazing stratagem to move through walls as if they're not there, which is amazing on like 14-inch moving carnivores, and like lean more into that battle shock weirdness that they do and just try to dominate primary because everybody's OCA and easy to get around with the moving through wall stratagem. That has some challenges as well, because at the end of the day, your army just auto gives up bring it down, deploy homers. If your opponent can out OC you or handle Chaos Knights and just continuously move block you despite your strats, you don't really have a recourse. So they just have some issues.
They also, their volume is a bit inconsistent against good invuln saves, and they're very susceptible to being tied up in combat, especially if like one flank gets tied up, the other gets dealt with by damage. So I found, as somebody who's played into Chaos Knights multiple times, that at a certain point the player skill, like return, isn't that high.
Right.
There's only so far that you can take Chaos Knights as a bunch of vehicle chassis.
Yeah, I think that's the case with a lot of the elite armies. There's a lot of player skill in general with elite armies because you have to micromanage your units. But with Chaos Knights especially, there's like 2 to 3 data sheets total in your list, and you are literally just putting them into your opponent. So there's only so much you can do with that.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, they are a solid enough faction. They just lack that extra dimension. Knights of Shade is awesome and allows them to have real tools and not just be move blocked in their own half of the board. But it's not really enough, I've found.
They've got interesting dynamics. Like everybody has that little indirect fire gun, which can like peel off cultists, which opens up some opportunity to hurt somebody's scoring.
They do have a lot of indirect fire out of nowhere.
Yeah. They do a lot of random mortals as well. Like I don't want to say Chaos Knights is bad.
No, they're not bad.
They definitely suffered from not getting attention. They got their index, and they largely have not changed at all since then. But
they've gone up slightly on their good ones, and Big Knights have
slightly
gone
up
down.
On the good ones, slightly down on the less good ones, and it's kind of the same net spot. I think we're waiting for a codex for them, and who knows when that'll happen, but that's really what's going to spark some life into this discussion.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I feel pretty confident just putting them in a B tier. I think they're one of the middle of B tier type armies where solid enough. If you're a Chaos Knight specialist, you can just take them to an event and outplay people. But outplaying the A tier armies and S tier armies is difficult.
They're definitely solid. They have some fundamental problems and weaknesses. You can punch up with them if you were very good. And maybe you can pass some lucky 4-ups, but that's about as far as you can take it.
Yeah. And also, one of the other things that has hurt them more, the start of the meta used to be very shooting heavy, where their invulns matter a lot. The meta has become increasingly more and more combat oriented, especially on the US open terrain formats, where they don't have an invuln in combat, and that can be quite brutal against all this high AP that you can see.
You know who could take advantage of them not having an invuln in combat? The Drukhari, with their Incubi with +1 to wound and all their new transport shenanigans.
+1 AP.
Or their whatever it's called, detachment. They got a new detachment.
Sky Splinter Assault
Sky
Force.
Splinter, that's the one. So Drukhari got some love in this latest detachment as well. They are another faction that, unlike Chaos Knights, has a breadth of data sheets, and they can really do a lot of different things on the table in terms of spamming Dark Lances or going more to transports in combat. They have those big beast squads that can scout around. They're incredibly fast, they're incredibly fragile, which makes them an army where you can express skill really intensely with them. So where do you think they land up?
So I've seen, I have very strong opinions on Drukhari because I think they lack a fundamental thing in the game of 10th edition, which is being able to hold down primary.
That's always their problem, right?
What you as the Drukhari player, what is literally standing on the objectives, especially objectives that are out in the open, which is usually the middle objectives, what is standing there that's going to survive and get you primary? And Drukhari are relatively paper thin. Even their transports aren't that durable, so they can't really threat overload. They can't put like 6 transports on an objective and be like, hi, I'll get some amount of stuff like Orks can, because they're not really popping out any like tons of OC. In that case, it'll be battle shocked anyway. But their inability to hold primary means that at the end of the day, games against them will always be close.
Yeah.
And if you have some sort of advantage somewhere else, like if you are a primary dominant army, you just go into that matchup with an advantage.
I think there's a lot to be said with the fact that just can't hold primary. They have no problem with secondaries. So many units, so cheap, so fast. They can go up and down. Secondaries will happen. You can play tactical. You can play fixed in a lot of cases. You got options for days. But at the end of the day, hold an objective in no man's land for a turn is incredibly difficult. So you really have to shift your strategy to contest. Keep primary even if you're both just kind of holding whatever side that you have left each other alone on, and then just fighting over the middle by contesting. You're never going to get a primary advantage that way. And if that's the case, like you said, the games are always going to be close. The games are always going to be hard. And then on top of that, they do kind of suffer from the fact that once their transports are dead in the Sky Splinter Force, they're really lacking rules because all the rules are tied to going into transports and doing shenanigans and getting lance when you get out and inverse cover when you get out. So a clever opponent who understands target priority against them can really counterplay by focusing down those venoms or whatever, and then leaving foot infantry wandering around with toughness 3 and a 5 up in bolt.
Yeah, I'll say one other thing is that the Sky Splinter has been both a blessing and a curse for Drukhari, I think. On the one hand, they got an awesome set of flavorful rules that really synergizes with how Drukhari wants to play as a raiding force. On the other hand, Drukhari with the Index detachment were simply a shooting army. They were Dark Lance spam the army, and so they could funnel all of their pain tokens into that one particular purpose. Now with Sky Splinter, they still want to have some amount of shooting activations. They also want to be making charge moves, consistent charges, and also hitting things hard in combat to get the full bonuses of some of the various upgrades they got. Well, where are they getting all those pain tokens from? It's actually quite difficult.
It's the other detachment.
Exactly. So yes, they are stronger with Sky Splinter, but it's opened up a different side of things where you have to be so careful with your pain token generation, even with having Chronos nearby to regen them, potentially. It's still not that consistent to have as much as you need, and so it's a very difficult army to play well and to play up, like play the better armies into.
Yeah. That said, if you're a phenomenal player like our coach Archon Skari, he's one of the best Drukhari players in the world, and he always makes them perform into matchups that no one thinks he has possibly any shot into. You can punch up with them, but if you're not literally the best Drukhari player in the world, this shit army is also incredibly challenging because of the nature of the challenges it faces. I think it's a good army nonetheless. It's just got some weaknesses about it. I think B tier is pretty where I want to put it.
I'm thinking lower end of B tier. I think they're below Chaos Knights for sure. I don't think they have the consistency of Chaos Knights.
No, they don't have consistency, and they're also a little bit challenging to deal with in terms of like their durability. But Chaos Knights can just fall back on durability.
Yep, exactly. Being paper thin does have its downsides.
Yeah. So next up, I believe we have the
I got
Adeptus Custodes?
No, you're right.
Yeah,
It's the Adeptus
Custodes. Yeah.
So the Adeptus Custodes are a faction that just received a brand new codex. And if you remember back to the previous tier list, they were ranked, I believe, in A tier. They were just behind Necrons, Black Templars, etc. So they were up in that top of A tier. And that was because 15 Wardens is just a bear to deal with. Getting 4 of Phenopane, -1 damage. They had fight first manipulation all over the place. So, and Trajan was ignoring all the mods.
And Ceaseless Hunter.
They had Ceaseless Hunter. They had a lot of tools that were amazing against other combat armies, and they just were able, if you were a 1-phase damage army, they could just tank that phase and then hit you like a ton of bricks with their advance and charge plays. And so it's just very difficult to deal with.
And Caladius are like the premier anti-tank vehicle in the game. They shoot a tank dies like more than half of the time.
Yep, the twin-linked, hidden on 2s, very good profile. On the other hand, they just got a codex, and a lot of that stuff disappeared. So no more -1 damage. Their defense against mortal wounds and devastating wounds is significantly worse. They don't have access to fight first in multiple plays. They lost all that fight first manipulation. So their matchups into like World Eaters and such get worse.
I know the Custodes community as a whole is largely really upset about the codex they've received in terms of like losing some of the rules that they've really helped them navigate a few matchups. Like always strikes first is incredibly important to like World Eaters, right? But then it doesn't matter much against Tau. -1 damage is often very useful, not always very useful, but having these tools taken away certainly hurts. And then the codex makes up for it by giving out their detachments and such, but those detachments don't help your durability and defense in the way that Custodes necessarily need.
Yeah, I think a lot of factions have had a similar issue, though not as much to this extent, which is that the Index detachment had a collection of rules that were synergistic and let you play in multiple different ways. They tried to buff you in multiple ways. With the split in the codex, you have very unique detachments that are trying to do like 1 or 2 things at most, and so all your good rules are spread out more so. Not in every time, but for Custodes, that's especially true. So they're definitely struggling on the side of their rules aren't amazing. They don't have very like an awesome detachment that just has everything that they need together. And in addition to that, some of their data sheets were nerfed in important ways, like Trajan doesn't just ignore all modifiers anymore, which was a huge deal into some of the other durable armies out there.
I think they've lost a lot of their specific problem-solving tech. You know, always strikes first in the World Eaters, damage ignoring mods into the Satan. Like little things like that really help them in specific problems. And if you have enough specific problems, well, then you're a faction that has actual problems. But with that said, you still are a faction that slams 15 Wardens on the board, has points left over, auto picks up tanks with Gladius a lot of the time. You're not without ability to play the game.
Yep, I still think Custodes will lean on allies like Draxus as well to get some of that firepower going. At the end of the day, I definitely think they're going to drop at least a tier here because they just don't have as consistent of a game plan into A-tier armies. And their lack of defense is really going to hurt them in the longer games against the better factions.
I think previously they were like in the upper end of A tier, and I think they're going to drop a solid tier. I don't think they dropped 2 tiers to C tier. I think they're still a good army. Like them versus Drukhari sounds like it's a pretty even game where there's still going to be Custodes and Drukhari's going to run around trying to hold primary somehow. Them versus Chaos Knights, I could see them still just kind of slaughtering through it. Their offense is actually increased versus a lot of factions. So I think putting them in kind of like at the bottom end of mid B tier, something like that sounds good.
Yeah, I think they're going to be down towards there, and at the end of the list we'll kind of rearrange and make sure they're in the order that we like. But at the end of the day, like how bad is 15 now obviously we're saying 15 Wardens, multiple Gladius. That's one archetype, and I think it's still going to be the best archetype, so they don't have a lot of list diversity.
Well, one of the challenges with Custodes is that, like, it's kind of the same data sheet in gold armor over and over again, right? Like, you have a Warden is a multi-wound model that's good at combat, okay at shooting, and then it techs more into durability, where in a Lars Terminator techs out of durability, but it gets up and down in more attacks and another wound. So it's really half of one, half of the other, you know? It's kind of the same thing in my mind, but I'm not a Custodes player.
Yeah, there's not as much internal diversity as you would like, which once again is definitely on the Codex's fault.
Yes. I think as they expand the line with time, the army will hopefully get more of differentiation in playstyle. They do have things like the Dreadnoughts, they do have things like the bikes. Those could be more competitive if they were priced a little bit more appropriately. I think one of the challenges Custodes faces is that they are trying to be a little too elite, where it's like at some point you just can't afford 100 points for a bike model. You know, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But hopefully, I still think Custodes are okay at the game.
Yeah, I think they'll have a build that can do decent amount of work in the tournament scene, but they're definitely going to struggle into the top armies, I think, now.
So we've got a few super chats to catch up on, folks. We've got Salomon Yuja with a $5 super chat. Trying to make a Raven Guard list. Should I go Vanguard or Gladius? Try to bring 6 Centurions and Justiciar plus Vanguard vets. I'm not really sure what the question is. Vanguard or Gladius for a Raven Guard list? I really think if you were going to do the 6 Centurions, you want to be Vanguard to help them move around. Yep. I think Raven Guard in general strikes me as a Vanguard-y type of faction. They're all about tricksiness and infiltration and stuff, and that's right up the Vanguard detachment's alley.
I think if you're a Raven Guard, loyalist, then I would definitely lean towards the Vanguard. It fits their playstyle the best. But Gladius is flexible for all different detachments, so you wouldn't go wrong. Honestly, try them both out because they're both very good.
We've got Adam Camilleri here, our man from Art of War Down Under. Appreciate your super chat. Hope you're doing great. What's 40k? Warhammer 40k is the game that we're here, that we all love, that we're talking about. And if you don't know what that is, you should check it out. Warhammer 40k.
Adam, head over to the Warren.vhx.tv. There's a 3-day free trial where you're learning all about Warhammer 40k.
If you subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave a comment, I promise you'll find out what Warhammer 40k is. Zlack Onion with the $5 super chat. It means a lot to the Orks pirate community that you retired your old jerseys when GW retired Badruk. That's what we're here for. You know, this is our protest to get Badruk back. I want Badruk.
In fact, on the back of our jerseys, it does say, "Rest in peace, Badruk."
Don't check that. I don't want to use my full name with a 500 yen super chat. I actually don't know that currency. I really want to put my 2 Drukhari Void Raven Bombers on the board. How badly would I be handing myself by doing so okay into Marines? Void Raven Bombers are actually quite okay. They suffer a little bit from being flyers in general. Having reserve, getting screened, and maneuvering can be challenging, but they do good damage when they show up. I think in the Marines specifically, they're the type of tank you want to bring to just pick up bodies.
Yep, they have a solid profile. They're a little overcosted for what you get because flyers have been broken in the past. But still, if you want a damage-dealing piece, and you already have all the scourges that you want, it's not bad to run them.
Thank you so much for your super chat. Just a couple more folks, and then we're going to get back to that tier list. But we love and appreciate all of your support for this channel. Red Room with a £5 super chat. There is no internal diversity for Custodes because they refuse to do something with forgeable datasheets. I would like to understand why. I wish I could give you an answer, but I do think that the studio and the forgeable team, they are on like different sides of the company. I don't really understand the internal workings, but because of that, they don't get the same.
Think of Games Workshop like Game of Thrones. There's just different fiefs and they're fighting constantly.
I don't know about all that, but for whatever reason, I think there's some challenges internally that are preventing the forgeable datasheets from getting on the same page as the codex, and hopefully they can resolve them. I think they want to. We want them to, at the very least. Yeah. And then C Loud MB with a £10 super chat. I'm very disappointed in the Custodes Codex at the moment. Doesn't feel good. I'll be switching to Chaos Space Marines now. Woo! So Nick, how to update is your masterclass after this Minotaur field manual? Thanks for all the great content. So yeah, there's a great series we have in War Room, which there's a link below, thewarroom.vhx.tv, where we go through all of the different factions in a 5-part deep dive from what even is this faction to playing it at the top level of tournament play, and we've covered Chaos Space Marines, and that's the question is it updated after this Minotaur field manual? And what we actually do is after we get these points changes, every time that those happen, some significant changes to the faction or the meta, we go back and do a 6-part to that series covering the changes and what they mean for the faction. So you best believe we are going to be getting that thing updated as quickly as possible. It's not updated just yet. The points changes happened like 3 days ago, but we were going to get them on very soon.
You've already played one game in the War Room with the new CSM updated points, and you'll be playing more in the future. So.
That's true. We are playing tons of games with all the new points, new codexes. Those are available right now, including a new CSM list that I tried against Quentin Johnson's Aeldari. And let me tell you, last time I played the nerf CSM into Aeldari, it did not end well for the CSM. But this time, spoiler, it did. So you want to check out how? Check that War Room out right now. All right, Seeks. That brings us back to our tier list.
And one of your favorite factions, Chaos Deamons. Great and clean one.
That's Fate Weaver for you. The best faction in the game. The best model in Warhammer. The coolest army in the game. They received absolutely zero changes.
Goose egg.
What is that? Come on, just give me a minute here. I need to complain for a second. GW, seriously, I want my changes. If nothing else, just for the shakeup of it. Are Deamons putting roughly around 50% win rate? Yes. Are they cool? Yes. Are they awesome? Yes. Do they need changes? Absolutely. There's some data sheets that need some love, like Fiends. The entire Slenish line is basically neglected.
The Skull Altar.
The Skull Altar. Come on. When can I get my Skull Altar on the table? But seriously, there's the internal balance of the codex could use some work, but overall I do think it's a strong faction. It's got some fundamental problems. Who doesn't these days? But I like them. They're my Deamons. I love them. What do you think about them, Seeks?
So I've played against Deamons many times. They have good rules. Being able to go back into reserve, being able to manipulate reserves, and come down closer than 9 inches away. They have good mechanics, but at the end of the day, they're just a pile of stats. There's not a lot of synergy in here where you really elevate. Khorne does have a synergy where you can put a lot of stacking damage buffs on a particular unit, but then a lot of the top of the game is just invuln saves, and so some of those
the extra buffs don't
matter as much.
I think overall Deamons have a few unique playstyles, and blending them together is also good. Like Nurgle does durability very well with Rodigus and Great and Clean ones. Those are awesome, and no one's going to complain about Nurglings or Plague Bearers. And then Tzeentch actually shoots. I've ran Fate Weaver and Lord Change 100 times, and Flamers are great, and they really do well together. And then Khorne with the Runmasters, they slam. Selesky is a Slenish model, and you can kind of pick your poison with Deamons, which is really nice. There's a lot of build diversity there. I've seen no 2 demon lists are really the same, and I think a lot of them are built along the same principles of going up, coming down 3 inches away, sticky the objectives, slam them in close combat with your Khorne stuff, shoot them with your Tzeentch stuff, use Nurgle to hold the objectives. But at the end of the day, Siegs, it's like you said, you're just a bunch of monsters getting shot in the face, or you're a bunch of blood crushers getting shot in the face, and you're trying to like win the game despite that. It's just a bit of stat application.
The damage of the army is relatively middling, I would say, in comparison to the top of the meta.
We have a transport problem for sure.
Definitely have a transport problem, and I would also say that the OC control isn't amazing. If you physically block the objectives, it's fine, or if you run like Plague Bearers, but at the end of the day, like those things can still die.
Well, I mean, if you think about points per OC, I pay 250-ish average for a big monster, and that 250 point monster has 5 OC. That is 1 OC for 50 points. Let's flip the script onto a Sister's Army, a Drukhari army, one of those cheaper factions. They get 10 OC for 50 points. Even a Space Army gets 10 OC for like 100 points. I'm just not able to do 1-for-1, here's my unit on your objective. I really have to kill your army down and physically block space to actually score primary. So in that sense, I have a bit of the same issue as Drukhari, where primary is very hard to hold on to.
The other thing about Demons is that they're a 5-turn army. They want to play all 5 turns of the game, and that's how they win games. They're not going to table you in 3 turns. They're not going to, all of a sudden just get flatlined either, but they want to play out a whole game. And so against some of the more aggressive armies out there, it can be very difficult to be able to play your game as you're losing a lot of resources in the early game, I found.
Definitely. I think they have some issues with like the classic screening, and this is going to come into play at the high end of competitive play. So I recently went to a tournament where I played Chaos Demons, and my opponents were not super experienced into that matchup and the archetype and the ways I was using the army. So I was not gotching my opponents. It's very forthcoming with all the rules, of course. We preach sportsmanship out here. But at the end of the day, experience is a real thing. And they weren't experienced, they didn't know how to screen efficiently, and they made some errors, which I could capitalize on super well. Demons are great at making punishment out of opponents' positioning errors. And I was able to win most of my games and get 1 draw, 4-0-1 finish at this event. But at the same time, my last few stream games on Art of War have been pretty not great for the Demons, and I feel as though when I go against really high-level competition who knows the ins and outs, knows the tricks, and can block my maneuvers, there's very little counterplay that I can then do. It's kind of like a, do you understand what I'm doing and can you block it kind of question I'm posing to my opponent. And if they can, and they do understand, they have the ability to block it, and they do, well, I'm probably going to lose that game, and that sucks. So I feel like they just have a ceiling, which I can't crack through.
I think there's 2 issues with the meta as well around them. First is that Hypercrypt is extremely popular, and that along with Grey Knights, and those incentivize opponents to, if they have 12-inch no-go zones, to bring them, which is not exactly what Demons want. And in addition to that, at the top of the meta, there are some just absurd damage armies like Ironstorm, like Thousand Suns, that can just do outrageous amounts of damage to armies that want to stand on objectives.
Yeah, there are certain factions like Tau with their new Monka or Ironstorm, which literally just look at one expensive model and just pick it off the table in 3 seconds or less. Demons are made of like 5 expensive models, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns your table. That's not really a plan. So I think they're floating in B tier with a lot of these other factions that just have like some weaknesses.
Yep, I agree. I think they're in a solid B tier for sure. All right, next up, I believe it's Leagues of Votann.
Yes, but before we hit Leagues of Votann, let's take a second to hit some more super chats. Chris Todd with $10 super chat. Hey guys, love the new shirts. You all put Space Marines as an A, but you also seem to have Divergent chapters listed below. You have not graded yet. Are Codex Space Marines really A tier? Doesn't feel like it. I think one of the challenges with Space Marines, Todd, is that, or Chris, rather, that the army has a lot of new players and veteran players, and win rates maybe is misleading here. If you're a very, very experienced person with Gladius, it is a bear to play against you. Same with Vanguard, but not everyone is a very experienced player. It's a very kind of newcomers kind of faction. So I think that might be part of the discrepancy there. But we're going to rank all the other chapters as well based on their unique attachments.
The other thing about that is, as I mentioned, the top Space Marine players typically are playing Black Templars Gladius, or Black Templars Ironstorm, or Blood Angels Ironstorm. So they're taking the Codex detachment, but playing it and their stats are being given to a different sub-faction.
But as far as these new jerseys go, yes, they're brand spanking new. They got their first turn this past weekend at the Battle for Salvation Team Tournament, got their first dub, and they're brought to you by the Army Painter, one of our amazing sponsors who we love. They take great care of us. We try to take great care of them.
I'm going to put on the muscle show over here to show off the sponsors.
And then we've We've got the Ryan G, $5 super chat. The guy that won a GT with a Spore Assist and 2 Psychophages in a Assimilation Swarm is probably going wild for the Tyranid changes. Hashtag Assimilation Swarm. You know what? We need John to play some Assimilation Swarm. Like this video for that.
Exactly. We need the Psychophages, and we definitely have 3 of them, so John has to just paint them up.
Thank you so much for your support for our channel.
Thank you.
All right, Zeke. So we did one of my factions. Now it's time for one of yours. Talk to me about Votann.
Okay, so Leagues of Votann. This is an army that started out the edition quite poor, got a big buff, being able to place 4 judgment tokens on the enemy, and since then performed a bit above average for a bit, and then in January got a set of points increases, and now they got 2 minor decreases. So they're basically sitting in the exact same spot. The meta above them has come down a bit, but effectively, Leagues of Votann are in a solid spot. They have 2 main builds effectively in this meta. One is Hyper MSU. You're running, 4 to 6 Sagittars, 20, maybe 20 of the troops, or maybe 15 Berserks, and trying to spread the board, trying to use the forward momentum of your scout moves to get up the table and pressure your opponent on their half of the board and force the action to stay on their half of the board, contesting their objectives, killing what you can. And that style is very strong. It plays the edition very well. Fast, shooty transports is fantastic. Now the second style that's really been coming into its own in the past couple months is a very 2-up save void armor style army. So you're looking at 2 to 3 land forts, you're looking at 15 plus Hearthguard, minimum 3 5-man squads, possibly a 10-man in there. And this kind of archetype is really trying to, mostly go towards durability. Your opponent can't really kill many of your resources that quickly. They have to over-dedicate to kill any one, and then you respond and murder them back in return with the most efficient firepower you have. So both archetypes are performing quite well. They've been getting GT wins and above. So I think Votann are in a perfectly solid spot. The issue with them I have found, and this is why I think their win rate was false before January, is because at a certain level, the army just fundamentally lacks tools, especially movement shenanigans. Yeah. And you're going to see a lot of the top armies have some way to manipulate movement outside of the normal your movement phase.
We always say Warhammer is won lost in movement, and we don't just mean necessarily your movement characteristic 7, so you're better than someone whose movement characteristic is 6. Like reserves, ingress, 3-inch away, do you strike up and down? These are all ways. Fly keyword, infantry keyword. These are great movement tools. Like
advance and charge, fall back and do things.
Any ability out of phase movement too, out of turn movement like Phantasm, Fire and Fade. That stuff is amazing as well. So that's what we mean by movement wins games. And like you said, Votann, they have a lot of tools. They shoot super efficiently into their judgment token targets. I find them a little lackluster when they're not shooting into judgment token targets.
Me too.
That's where I have learned that. So that can be not so punishing against 4 greater Deamons as an archetype for the Deamons versus Votann match. But maybe Deamons or Votann versus Sisters, I have 50 units and you're going to pick 4 of them. That's not going to get you very far. So there's some matchups will go better or worse for Votann in that sense. They do have great durability in the land forts and the Terminators. Like, I cannot believe how hard those Terminators are to put down.
Just a two wound model.
And the OC3 Sagittars, man, OC3 is great on them. They shoot just randomly very hard sometimes, and then the dudes are like annoying to kill. It's also small and compact, very easy to hide and maneuver, and they have some ability to play the mission with all the screening pioneers running around the flanks. I think they're a solid army. I do think they have challenges. I've never seen them really blow someone out unless somebody has deployed poorly or they got a bad terrain table and the Votann go first, get the scout moves off, and just lay the alpha strike in. I think I've never really seen Votann get blown out either. I think Votann are a very good scoring floor army, great in teams, for example, where you just, like, no matter what, keep it close. But also, they, in singles, you're going to be playing those tight games where you're trying to just, like, eke out a win, and it can oftentimes be like, did I score a card I could draw for a very close 5-point game?
Yeah. So ultimately, I feel like because they don't have those extra like player skill tools, they can kind of be very difficult to play into the A and S tier armies. Yeah. I found that they're probably an upper B tier faction in my mind, where they can play into the A tier armies, they can win those games for sure, but at the end of the day, it is always, you have to make some sort of awesome move, something your opponent didn't expect. Yeah. You have to outplay them in some fashion to be able to get a win there, because the rules that you have in your book, while as good as they are, aren't they don't let you really exercise all the tricky things you could potentially do. They don't force a lot of tough decisions on your opponent as some other factions do.
Yeah, I promise we're not just going to put everything into B tier, folks. Where this just happened to be how we broke it out in the first few. But basically, I do think it's going to struggle to fight those A tier armies. It's going to really not have much shot at beating an S tier army unless you're savagely better than your opponent. But it's like solid in B tier. Like, you know,
Yeah, I think it's upper
It's
B.
the upper end of B tier. I definitely think it's like got competitive games with Deamons and Drukhari. I know as a Demon player, I've had great games with Votann back and forth, nail biters. So I think they're kind of in the same power spectrum. And then I think they punch up a little bit better than some armies like Demons and
I
Drukhari
agree.
do.
I think because they have that MSU aspect, they can just play the mission well.
Yeah. They have a good floor, unlike Demons, who can sometimes just get tabled.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of an army that might have a good floor, though, Siegs, what about the Adeptus Mechanicus?
So, the Adeptus Mechanicus are an army that is much maligned. And it has been since the Index arrived. Then the Codex arrived and gave them good rules, at least in Scutari 100 cohort, but kept the data sheets as some of the most subpar in the game. And the reason is that for the most part, it's an army with not too many rerolls, and certainly not rerolls to hit, rerolls to wound. It's not like super efficient units. And in addition, it's very low EP, very low damage for the most part. And that just doesn't cut the mustard against anything that is good.
They
have a
are
killing problem.
army of trash. Quentin's favorite. Basically, they take a million stats for way too cheap, and they have like not too cheap because their offense is useless, but their defense is decent, and they have enormous bases, which you wouldn't think is a meaningful thing in this game. But when I look at like 5 Taraxi, and it's like 65 points, and it's like 540 mil bases that fly infantry, I'm like, that's
That are
really
2 wounds
good.
each,
2
5
wounds,
up
like,
invuln,
that's
stealth.
really good. That's really annoying. That's a lot of real estate on the table. That's a lot of move blocking potential. And you take the Dragoons. It's like one of those ovals. The 2 of those is like a CD-ROM for those of you who were not born in the 2000s.
I don't even think you know what a CD-ROM is.
I saw one the other day. That's why I said it. And then it's just like, it's crazy. Like the amount of space on the table this army takes up. If you've ever seen Richard Siegler put his AdMech on the board, it's like the deployment zone is full, inch by inch by inch, and there's 20 dudes in reserve, and you can try to kill it, but it's not that fast to kill. And then it moves at you, and then you can't move through it. It's just in front of you, and it's really annoying.
Yeah, basically, if you're playing pure AdMech and you're playing the Hunter cohort, you just jam your list full of all relatively durable things for their points cost, and you send wave after wave at your opponent. Because most armies in the game can't fall back and do things.
Look at these dudes. Little 40 mil bases.
Those are Rustalkers. They're now 5 of those is 60 points. 60
They
points.
infiltrate. They have 40 mil bases.
No, those ones don't infiltrate.
The infil stalkers do.
So the army is the army of literal. You have to move block your opponent. You have to tie them up in combat. You have to slow them down, and you focus entirely on points. Every unit in your army gets traded over the course of the game to score you points and deny your opponent points. And that is the only playstyle that exists. There is no damage dealing playstyle. I don't care how many Scorpius Disintegrators or whatever nonsense you throw into your list. It's not going to do anything. Stop wasting points on it. Run all the cheap stuff, jam it up the board, and because they have this one very niche playstyle, it's an extremely hard army to play.
Yeah.
Because
Well, you can't do damage.
At least in Sisters, which has a lot of trash as well, you can put a couple activations and be like, these multi-meltas will do 18 damage and blow this thing up. And I'll kill that one thing, and that's enough. Or these Arcoflagellants will just pick up that one unit, and that's enough.
You can create plans based around like specific damage.
Killing one thing or 2 things.
Right.
AdMech are like, I'm going to kill 0 things this turn, but I am going to jam up these 3 units. They're never going to do anything, and they're going to be locked in jail.
You're a little bit vulnerable to like somebody doing it back to you because you can't kill move blocks yourself. I mean, you can kill like 5 Eldar Rangers standing in front of you, but you're not killing like 20 Gargoyles before they move block your entire army. You're just kind of sad about it. So in some matchups, you're literally dicing off to see who move block the other first, and that's like the upper end of your matchup spectrum. Sometimes you just like can't play the army.
Yeah, so like the Hunter cohort has good tricks. It's got Lone Up, it's got Go Back into Reserve, it has Advance and Charge Access. It has a very good suite of rules. The data sheets are what lets the army down. And the other thing about it is, Nick mentioned, their AdMech actually has good profiles into T3 bodies. If the meta was like Tyranids, Endless Swarm, and Sisters, and GSC, AdMech would actually be one of the better factions in the game, in my opinion, because they are actually very good into those armies.
Yeah.
And
I played
it's played well.
GSC and Sisters into your AdMech. There's some of my factions, and I would assume that my army should beat yours by definition because, like, I'm playing the good armies and you're playing the bad armies, as they say. But no, like, the matchups have dynamics to them, and your army eviscerates my trash armies. Like, you are made of strength 3 times 1,000 shots, and my toughness 3 armies are like, please, God, no. But not every army is vulnerable to the strength 3 spam that AdMech presents. In fact, most are not.
So if you've seen it, basically how I think about AdMech is I brought them to a couple tournaments now, and I've gone undefeated so far. And I actually have a winning record with Hunter Cohort in the house of the games that I've played.
Just shows you skill matters.
So it doesn't matter. If you are playing against equal skill opponents, you can win with AdMech. It just takes... You have to outplay them multiple turns out of the game. Not just one turn, not just one play. You have to outplay them multiple turns out of the game. There has to be a lot of things that they don't expect you to do.
Which can work, especially if you're like big fish, small ponding it. But it can also not work. You know, there's a lot of times where AdMech just lose the matchup because their army actually doesn't do damage.
Yep.
It's not like, I don't want to put it in B tier because I think it's got a lower floor than a lot of the factions. Move blocking is great. It's incredibly hard to pull off effectively enough to actually win the game as your only main strategy. And they don't have another plan.
And that was where I was getting, is that because it's so monodimensional, if your opponent is familiar with AdMech and understands exactly what they can do, they can take a lot of advantage of it, and so they just lack a plan. There is no plan B. It is literally the only thing.
One thing you got going for you is that no one has reps into AdMech, so
very few people have reps into AdMech, and they make tons of mistakes, and so you're able to find ways to win a game. But if I was only playing against the people in this house and other top world-class players around the world, I would have definitely a losing record, I think.
So what do you think you're putting them?
I think they are a clear C tier army.
C tier, not D tier.
Not D tier. They are not, like, the Hunter cohort specifically is enough of a rule set, and the data sheets are cheap enough that you can win games, especially into the B tier armies. It's hard beating the A tier armies and above, but you can do it. But because they can at least punch up into the B tier armies, yes, they are C tier, but they're not. D tier is like, wow, this is just insane. Their index was D tier for sure.
Yeah. All right, so we've got a couple more super chats to hit up. So we got Dominic Galano, a $5 super chat from Battle for Salvation, the tournament we just went to this past weekend. Dom here from your round 1 game at BFS. It was a pleasure to play, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the cookies. We did, Dom. Thank you. You were an awesome opponent, awesome round. We had such a great time at that tournament.
We had a lovely time. It was an amazing event, and the cookies were definitely part of that.
Appreciate all your support.
Thank you.
And we got Dragons of Dragons, £2 super chat. Cyber cohort is the worst attachment in the game.
It is. Jack keeps saying it's Custodes attachment, but he hasn't read the AdMech rules.
He doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
I don't know.
He doesn't know.
That's not good.
Actually, I forced him to read it in the tier list.
Now he knows. Thanks so much for your support. Okay, so now we're going to talk about one of my factions. It's about time. We're talking about the Adeptus Sororitas, previously bemoaned by John for being one of the worst factions in the game. We can admit when we're wrong. This faction is awesome. This faction is great, and this faction is capable of winning all kinds of tournaments as it has done so.
Yep.
But recently, it's taken a little bit of a slap on the wrist for its overperformance across the meta.
Twice. January ends in the MFM.
That's right. So now we're looking at 140 points on Triumphs, Arcos all the way up to 160. The Exorcists went up, like all these things went up. But where points go up, other points come down. They couldn't give that treatment to Demons. They have gone for Celestian Sacristants getting reduced in cost. They've gone for Penitents and Mortifiers getting reduced in cost. And overall, the Sisters army as a whole is largely side graded. I actually think the most painful thing they did was up Crusaders from 25 to 35, because that's like a 40% increase on units I was taking 3 of. I mean, it's only 30 points, but like when you take 3 squads, it's like, okay, I don't bring the 3rd one now. It's really annoying. Largely, though, I don't think Sisters have moved too much in terms of where they are in the meta. They are still a very strong army. They have some bad matchups. I think Sisters vs. Canoptic Court is like iconic as one of the most challenging matchups. And as we just discussed, AdMech have got their number. So
it's a weird It's a weird matchup.
It's weird. But that said, Sisters have an incredibly consistent game plan. They reward player skill. The more reps you put into them, the more you understand, the more magic you can make on the table. I'm still learning stuff from my Sisters army. And they are really, really, really just able to play almost anything in the game because of the nature of how MSU they are with multiple small units, how elite they can be with their miracle dice manipulation on things like the Volgons, and how much dimension they have their army with coming back to life characters, reserves, moving after shooting, transports all over the place. They just have a lot going on in terms of army dynamism.
Dynamics, yeah.
Dynamics.
Well, they also have some really powerful melee manipulation as well into combat armies.
Oh yeah, combat matchups are like so fun because you have suffering and sacrifice, which forces people to fight you.
Garbage.
So this is the trick. You like toss 2 Crusaders into Angron. I call it Angron jail. I love doing this to World Leaders players. And charge 2 Crusaders in, and then I charge like, I don't know, something I care into this. It's going to do credible damage, like Triumph or Arcoflagellants or something. And then you spend 1 CP and force Angron to like slaughter 2 Crusaders. And it's like, okay, that was adorable. Take 25 saves.
And then I'm going to do it again.
And then Angron's stuck. He can't fall back and do stuff. So he's just literally, we're going to fight these dudes now. And if you are clever about this, you charge 2 squads of Crusaders into Angron at the same time. He spends 1 fighting 1, next combat fighting the other. And it's like, all right, Angron, you are done.
It's like, wow, I got value out of this.
That's why we take the Crusaders. I think they're A tier. Sisters are great.
It's clear A tier, and the thing about them is that they've been winning events and performing extremely well across different metas. So whether it's the US Open meta, whether they're UKTC, whether on mainland Europe, Australia, it doesn't matter. Sisters have performed well.
And not only that, Sisters also have amazing build diversity. I don't run Volgons or Penitent Engines or Castigators. There's people with triple Castigator winning tournaments. There's people with Volgons winning tournaments. Like, there is so
There's
much.
Triple Exorcist builds.
Triple Exorcist winning tournaments. Like, pick your poison with this faction. Make it your own. I love it. There's actually an entire, not only a 5-part masterclass series in the Warhammer, but also an 8-part Finding My Faith series where I started maybe 6 months ago as someone who had not played Sisters in 2 years. And I've learned the faction through grinding reps and just analysis, and now I'm like crushing tournaments with them, and really excited about that. So if you want to follow that journey and learn about Adeptus Sororitas, you can check out thewarroom.vhx.tv in the link below for your 3-day free trial.
Absolutely, and it was highly praised by the Sisters players.
I got a lot of people at Battle for Salvation come up to me and were like, I'm starting Sisters, I'm watching your series, it's awesome. Really made my day. Thank you so much for all your support, folks.
All right, what do we got next here? So Sisters clear A tier. We'll see where they fit within A tier. But moving on, we have the lovely Aeldari. So...
we can do the Tyranids. Let's do the Tyranids.
Start Tyranids.
So we've got Tyranids coming up over here. And Tyranids are an army that also got a lot of side grade changes. Gargoyles going up to 85. Good. Gargoyles, OP. Why are we doing that? But you know what else?
They are so good.
Some things are not OP, like Psychophages and those units, the Warriors. The Warriors are iconic. I'm glad the Warriors are going down in points. Somebody has to, because these Gargoyle Menaces are too strong. So overall, I think Tyranids are largely kind of the same as where they used to be. The changes are like helpful, but like not really.
They open up a new
whatever
detachment to be a bit better, but at the end of the day, they don't really change the 2 best detachments.
No. Invasion Fleet is still going to do exactly what it did and just pay a slight upcharge for its monsters, and the Gargoyles. Endless Swarm is going to probably run slightly fewer Gargoyles, but still run Gargoyles, and make up for it with Gaunts. So basically, I think the whole idea here with Tyranids is that they are a really hard army to play. I will definitely give them credit for that, because they cap out at relatively low strength 9, kind of across the faction, except for a few combat sources. And that means punching up into vehicles can be really hard. And you're really, really, really leaning into move blocks, positioning, model casualty pulling shenanigans, and fire and fading cleverly with Gargoyles to buy yourself time to isolate and destroy your opponent with your monsters, while hand waving and ooh-la-laing primary into existence with Neurolictors and things like that, which can work. It's a good strategy. John does amazing results with the Nids, but man, is that a hard game to play.
Yeah, basically every game you go into is just a difficult matchup, but at the same time, player skill. The army rewards player skill like very few other armies, is what I found. The Gargoyle datasheet as a whole is one of the highest skill cap units out there.
I personally think the Gargoyle datasheet is the best datasheet in the game.
It might very well
It
be.
really is crazy.
The movement
OC2,
shenanigans.
advance and then shoot, and then fire and fade. Auto advance 6 for some archetypes.
They have deep strike, so you can rapid ingress them in and then go.
Yep, and then they fly, their infantry, those are the two of the best keywords as well. And then their bases are nice for conga lines. It's a nice 10-man unit, so you're not just insta-dead to like a little bit of Overwatch. Like, it's very hard to not get your army move blocked and objectives contested by gargoyles, and that can be game losing.
Basically every time, so we were at the event, John was playing Tyranids, I'd look over at his table, and whatever the opponent's best resource was, whether it was like a land raider or something, was literally wrapped in gargoyles.
Oh my god.
Just
Every
wrapped in
single
gargoyles.
I would look over, because it's a team turn, right? Like I'm captain, so I'm checking on everybody, making sure the team is overall doing sound across all 8 different games. Whenever I go to John's table, and he's always in the squirreliest games, because everything's a bad matchup for Tyranids, and he's like, they just gargoyle jail. Everything's surrounded in gargoyles. No one can move an inch. I'm like, John, you're fine. What are you talking about? So I think Tyranids are amazing if you are very capable with them. As the opponent of Tyranids, I always hate dealing with the gargoyles and all the tricks and layers of doing that. At the same time, I'm never getting blown out by the Tyranids. They're not that kind of faction.
Nope, their damage output is relatively low. It's towards the bottom half of the game. They have a couple good units like the Maleceptor, Exocrines, etc., but they don't do outrageous amounts of damage. They do damage by surviving multiple turns and drowning you in bodies. So whether it's the Endless Swarm variant, the Invasion Fleet variant, Tyranids have player skill type of units in their lists, but it's still hard to outplay people.
Yeah.
So I personally, we rated them pretty high last time. I still value them quite highly. I still think that they're low A tier.
Yeah.
Is where
they
we put
have
them
the
last
real
time.
ability to punch up into S tier factions. I've watched it happen. It's hard. It's difficult. You do have to outplay people. They put up really even, honest games with like what we put into A tier so far in terms of Sisters and Space Marines. Those are just tight games of Warhammer. And I do feel as though when I'm playing the B tier factions that I will probably struggle into the Tyranids.
Also, if you can 19-1 Sean Naden's Thousand Sons with Tyranids,
Put them in S tier.
it cannot be lower than A tier.
Put
It
'em in
just
S tier.
cannot be. And I'll stand on that ground.
Those are facts right there. That's causation, that's correlation, that's a fact. We've got Z-Mobs with a $2 super chat. Anyone doing Green Tide video on the War Room soon? Actually, we have one in there already where Jack piloted the Green Tide against Quentin's Drukhari. But yeah, we're trying our best to make sure we do a breadth of army demonstrations in the War Room. So it's not just like your faction gets your game. It's every archetype detachment gets a game over time. So we're going to definitely be working there to get more Green Tide matches into the War Room for you as well.
Definitely.
And now we have one more super chat from the Silent King.
The Silent King, he's right there.
He's phoning a friend.
He's the king.
Thanks for your great content. Learned so much from you guys. Quick question. I'd like to play Scorpec spam like in the good old times. Is it doable now?
100%. In fact, there is a game releasing today in the Worm where I play a bunch of Scorpec Destroyers with the Scorpec Lords, which I've never put on the table, up against John's Gladius Dark Angels, and you're going to see them perform there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your super chat, Silent King. Let's get back to the tier list. Up next is the Death Guardians of the Galaxy.
The Death Guardians. So Death Guard used to be, D tier was named after Death Guard. It was D
Death
tier.
Guard for D tier.
Yep, exactly. And that has not been the case for many months, in fact.
Look, they actually took the complaints of the community seriously. Like, Death Guard is dog crap. They were like, this is not happening.
They were so bad.
They
The
were
index
so
was
bad.
heinous.
Dude,
they literally lost to AdMech. The
I
AdMech
stopped
index.
playing Death Guard and gave them to my boy Quentin, our new hire, who's no longer new, because I was like, Quentin, this is your tax. You're new, you get Death Guard. And then he flew with them. He's flown into the sun and become a Death Guardian warrior.
And he's benefited from the upgrades that they've received.
So let's talk about it. First, they were like, all right, -1 toughness and an aura sometimes is just not enough of a rule for an entire faction. So they changed it, and now it's pick your poison of -1 OC and leadership, -1 weapon skill, ballistic skill, or -1 armor save and...
It's just armor save.
Well,
that's enough.
That's
enough. Trust me.
So basically, that is awesome. And then you look at the Death Guard data sheets, and you look at the Plague Marine, and you just like look at what those models are wearing. They got a trench coat full of knives and bolters and plasma guns and melta guns and plague spewers and plague belchers and plague vomiters and whatever.
Flails.
And plague frails. So ultimately, what this means is 1,000 garbage attacks, which is like not that good. But now they're cheap. They're cheap garbage attacks.
And your opponent is -1 save.
And -1 toughness. And all of a sudden, those Storm Bolters are picking up Space Marines. And you're like, what the hell is happening? Then they had to do like a ludicrous amount of mortal wounds because they've priced their characters into like so cheap I have to take them. And now they've also got cheap vehicles, bloat drones at 90 points. What are we doing? What are we doing?
And it has relative speed, so their vehicles are able to get into contagion range to benefit all those infantry. This is one of the highest damage dealing armies at close range in the entire game.
They've really shifted Death Guard's identity from slow and trying to be durable to slow, but not that slow because vehicles are still vehicles. Trying to be durable, they're still toughness 5, they're still vehicles with 5 pinballs. And now, if you're near them, they're really the debuff army. They just debuff you into just useless stats that just evaporate from their offense or literally flail at like -2 to hit, can't do anything, shooting close combat sadness. And depending on which matchup you're in, because you can choose this matchup by matchup, they can really tailor their game plan to capitalize what you are trying to do and counter it.
Yeah, armies that are getting -1 weapon skill, then a -1 to hit on top of that, or the ballistic skill, that is brutal for almost any army in the game if they need to get close to do damage.
Yeah. I definitely think that Death Guard are challenging to play because they still aren't fast. And you can definitely make positioning errors that you can't fix. If you get your units isolated, you're just going to lose a lot of stuff and not have any position on that flank anymore.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, their durability isn't insane.
No.
It's okay, but it's not, best in class.
You have to really understand your opponent's army, how their dynamics work, how your army interacts with theirs, so you can build that counter strategy because you choose at the table which contagion you want, and really you're choosing when to get Plague Marines out, where to get them, what to shoot with your target priority, what to lead with in terms of do I just push the Rhino forward first, the Bloat Drone first. These are all real decisions, which you can make logical choices, but doesn't mean you're making the right choice. And I think that is what kind of holds Death Guard back a little bit from being like absolutely cream of the crop. But if you are a great player with them, they are painful to play against.
Yep, absolutely. They also have still one of the few instances of fight first that's easily accessible, which is quite a boon. So I think they are solid A tier.
Solid A tier.
And one of the better factions in the game.
I think in a singles environment, it's very hard to consistently pick an army that beats Death Guard. In a teams environment, they fill an amazing role being an all-comers that also hard counter some factions. They're just great. They're just great army.
Yeah, Quinn was just like, I'll just win every game by a little bit, every time.
And he did. He did. That's all you need.
Did.
So we've got a couple super chats. We got Holocom with a 10-pound super chat. Love the Assimilation Swarm with discounted Tyrant Guard. I started running them by themselves in full squads for the resurrection value. Luck or valid strategy? I think Tyrant Guard are like incredibly tough to kill, and I think that is something that is valuable in Tyranids. Tyranids need to hold primary through durability a lot of time and move blocks, but a combination of those two. I don't know much about Assimilation Swarm, I'll be honest, John's our Tyranid guy, but they've been putting up some results lately, and I think they've been a sleeper detachment.
Yeah, and with almost all the points decreases help that specific detachment among other ones.
Definitely worth a revisit. I know it's been pretty Invasion Fleet or Endless Swarm is the two main ones, but with points changes come new opportunity,
Yeah. I'm excited to see it on the table too, because I've never seen a Psychophage do anything.
I've never seen a Psychophage, period.
And they couldn't pick it out of a lineup.
I really couldn't. You line 10 Tyranid monsters, I can't tell you which one's a Psychophage. But Z-Mob's $2 super chat probably could. Quinn is the GOAT. Thanks for all the content.
Quinn is the GOAT.
He is the GOAT.
Thank you so much for the super chat.
Dragons with a G-pound super chat. Is Death Guard Terminator spam good? I don't think you need to spam them out. At the end of the day, they still slow. They are not unkillable. You're going to make yourself a bad Custodes army. But I don't hate Death Shrouds. I think Death Shrouds are like a really solid unit, good anti-infantry. Ironically, they're great at picking up Custodes. I know Quentin's been brewing up some weird Blight Lord tech that I am not too privy on, but if anyone can make that work, it's Q Money. So I definitely think there's a place for Death Guard Terminators in the meta as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen some lists perform with them.
Cody Steele with a $10 super chat. Shout out to my boy Z-Mob, best player in Arkansas. Thank you so much for your support, Cody Steele. I'm going to have to come to Blake's house and tell him that he needs to get his game up so he can be the best player in Arkansas.
And then Dallas Nash says Montca or nothing.
Dallas Nash.
Montca or nothing. Awesome. I love Montca.
Thanks so much for all your support. And then finally we got Tim G, who's been a member for 21 months. It's almost 2 years. Thanks, Tim G. If Dark Admech / Men of Iron become a faction, who on the team has dibs? If it's Dark mech. I think there's a lot of competition, right? It's dark chaos. That's me. That's my territory by definition.
It's mech.
C's got his robot people, and then Quentin just voiced a little squeaky me from the corner there. So I don't know what his hat is in this race, but he's got one.
Well, he's the goat, so.
He's the goat. He does get to choose. Thanks so much for all your support, folks. So next up, we've got the Blood Angels, the Bengals, Jack's tattooed faction.
So, like we mentioned before, since this is the first supplement that we're doing, we're going to base the supplemental chapters on their own unique detachments. So in this case, Sons of Sanguinius, which did receive a buff in January. And Sons of Sanguinius, while it isn't as popular as Blood Angels Ironstorm or Blood Angels Gladius, is still a pretty solid faction overall, I would say. And now, Blood Angels did receive some points increases. Death Company, Lamartes, the Sanguinary Priests went up, and those are all auto takes, basically. But on the other hand, Assault Intercessors with jump packs went down, and those are already starting to see play in Blood Angels, and the Vanguard Marines didn't go down. And one of the biggest things about Blood Angels is you can take a 2 in Space Marine with a 4 up Invuln, because it has the Storm Shield, and throw a Sanguinary Priest in there for 5 of Pheno Pain. And as somebody who has watched those units on the table, they require dramatically more damage than you think to even get close to chipping through that unit.
Yeah.
It is kind of insane. And then they hit quite hard, and they're very fast and able to easily tie up enemy resources from a distance. I think Blood Angels were kind of a sleeper pick, where they didn't have a lot of exploration. People started exploring like Firestorm early with them when the Space Marine Codex came out, and then some versions of the Ironstorm Blood Angels, especially with indirect fire. But now it is very much, playing Blood Angel style, which is run a ton of combat, the Assault Jump Intercessors, Vanguard, and Death Company, jam them up in the center of the table, and start smashing your opponent after that. It plays much more like 9th edition, and I think this suits Blood Angels a lot better. They have a couple Ball Predators in there. I've been impressed with Blood Angels the times I've seen them on the table, honestly.
I think the same thing. I think Blood Angels are a sleeper. I think they are coming out of nowhere, coming in fast, as you would expect. The 5-point drop on Assault Intercessor jump pack just has got me concerned now. I think they're like, you might run 30 of those things. Death Company are still solid. Sanguinary Guard got cheaper. The Sanguinor, this man heroics out of reserves. I hate that. Like, what are we talking about? What even is that?
And he has
rule?
fights first and precision.
So that's like a whole thing in and of itself. The +2 strength on the charge. We actually had Perry Castor from France, one of the top French players in the world. He came onto our show, the Art of War podcast, and he talked about Blood Angels before it was cool, I will say. And he was preaching about how +2 strength changes all the mathematical breakpoints, and now your intercessors and Death Company, everything just hits basically functionally +1 to wound in all the very durable targets, and you have a quantity of attacks like no other for all the not very durable attacks. So you basically just table people, and it's a very 1-2 kind of punch army where you stage turn 1, you overwhelm turn 2, and one of the weaknesses to a stage turn 1 type of army is your opponent getting to rebuttal in their first turn and charging you, engaging you on their terms, that kind of thing. And that's where Sanguinor comes in, swoops in, heroics out of reserves, and messes up your tempo as you try to counterplay their stage 1-2 combo. It's really hard to play against Blood Angels, and they can completely overwhelm and destroy you really quickly if you let them, basically.
Yeah. I think on the US Open terrain format, you see more of the combat style of Blood Angels, whereas on UKTC, you're seeing more of the Ironstorm version, where you bring a bit more guns to go alongside your combat. So both styles have play. Like I said, the Ironstorm variant, the Gladius variant of Blood Angels are ranked with the Space Marine symbol. This is only Sons of Sanguinius, but I honestly think Sons of Sanguinius is solid B tier.
Yeah, I think Blood Angels, honestly, I don't know. Sons of Sanguinius, I think could be A tier.
It could be lower.
It really could.
But we can put it near Votann for now, and then decide.
I think it's strong, but we'll see.
Yeah, we can readjust at the end.
Okay, so we got a couple super chats. We got Cody Steele with $10. Ready for Death Guard to take over the meta thanks to Quentin. I got 9th in a GT this weekend, and I am loving them.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Appreciate your support, Cody. And Quentin is really helping the Death Guard community over there in the War Room. So if you're interested in that faction or any of the factions, hop on down there and learn from the best. Kill Kaya with a $5 super chat. I've been playing T-Sons and 10 Sisters have been it's my hardest matchup. Any suggestions? Sisters are a challenging matchup for T-Sons, I will say. But if you can get them into like a control style build and isolate and destroy them instead of trying to overwhelm them all at once, they aren't really great at getting to you. You know, they're not the fastest army. So basically, try to keep an even primary score where you're holding 2 objectives, they're holding 2 objectives, and basically sacrifice Zangors and Enlighten with double moves and stuff like that to keep the Sisters army pinned in while you're scoring secondaries, hopefully contesting some primary, and snipping off the edges with Doom Bolts. If you try to fight Sisters head on, they will beat you in that fight. It is a challenging matchup though, for sure. And then we've got Ninja Lee 83 with the £5 super chat. I'm considering changing to Chaos Knights. I find Tau high mental load. Would they be a good choice, or would you avoid them for a tournament setting? I think Chaos Knights definitely, I would hold off until there's a codex before picking them up right now. You could pick them up just to learn them, especially as a very different change of pace from Tau. But I'm a big fan of Rising the Challenge. If you're finding Tau to be a little bit more challenging, I think just getting that worm and Mr. Siegs will teach you how to do it.
I definitely will. So I think Tau is a hard army to play because you can see there's a huge discrepancy between the veteran win rate of them and the average tournament goer. So it is a hard army to play, but once you do learn it well, you are going to win a lot of games.
And you're going to be doing a Tau coaching series coming up soon.
I am doing a Tau group coaching at the Warhammer40k.com. So if you want to sign up for that, join me. It's going to be a 5-part series with live discussion with myself, learning Tau and the
only
codex.
limited number of signups for that, so you definitely want to.
I think there's only 2 tickets left.
Only 2 tickets left. You want to get in right now. That's the answer. All right, folks. So after this, we've got the Chaos Space Marines, who just saw quite a little bit of a glow up in the most recent Mid-Storm Field Manual. They got a lot cheaper across the board.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of places that matter.
I was surprised.
Some places that I couldn't believe it. Like Legionnaires going down 10. They were already an auto pick at 90, and now it's like a start with 6 squads at 80. You know, what are we talking about? Venom Crawlers down to 110. I just ran 6 squads of Legionnaires and 3 Venom Crawlers into Quentin to show it off, and man, did I show it off. Yeah. It was awesome. The Havocs down to 120 from 135. Like, I feel good about paying for Havocs now. I'm not like, guys, there's a lot of priciness to just jam las cannons in. No, now I'm jamming las cannons in sustained 5s. Let's go. CSM have got some life back into them. They're a little bit more multiple small unit MSU style than, say, they used to run, but they used to be pretty similar in terms of like Chosen riding around in rhinos, dumping out at people with Forge Fiend and Obliterator support. Now I think you're going to see a lot more Legionnaire joined by character hopping out of Rhino with Havoc support, and then you can choose your poison between Predators and Venom Crawlers to be some more shooting fire support there too.
Yeah, so CSM are a weird army because one of their big downsides was they weren't a great scoring army, they were a great killing army. And they needed to kill you quick so that they could score a lot of points in the late game. And they just started losing a lot of damage with the January update. However, with having more resources, they can actually just play a normal scoring game now with having that more MSU style and not having like 2-3 Forge Fiends, bunch of Obliterators, and a couple Chosen units.
That's a great way to put it. They've kind of been able to shift identity because now their units have gotten cheap enough to the point where they're no longer super elite by definition as a faction. They can actually play a more balanced game, and that allows them to not be forced into tabling their opponent as their strategy. I think that's a huge shift, honestly. I think they've gone from wherever they were at the lower end of E tier, possibly even to A tier, but at least at the very top of E tier, I would put them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think because they still have very good rules. Like, I would kill to have access to the lethal sustain 5 combos that they can get access to, because it makes any weapon just devastating into a lot of targets. But at the same time, I want to have my cheap stuff. And they were hurt a bit by the Deamons change for allies.
Definitely.
But I think they are still in a solid enough spot. I think we ranked them like middle of B last time, and I think they've gotten a bit better since then.
I think Blood Angels and CSM, I think based on, at the end of this, we could make a real argument to push them both to A. I think they're very similar in terms of strength, but we shall see. Okay, so then after that, we've got another Nick faction here.
Yeah, we do.
The Four-Armed Friends, the Genestealer cults. Another faction, which always receives some highly impactful changes. So last
They got
time,
some changes this time, though.
we did. Last time we got 5 points on the pure strains, which that was more insulting than
They
helpful.
remembered you were faction.
But this time we got some real love in the form of the trucks coming down from 110 to 90. Now the truck is nothing special. The truck is basically a rhino in terms of defense, but the truck is also a reroll wounds pivot point for your unit. So if your unit gets out and the truck shoots you, the unit will get reroll wounds, which is nice for all of your GSC weapons. That is nice. Unfortunately, not many rules synergize with this detachment and the truck. I think as we get a codex, maybe we'll get a truck detachment. This could be a lot nicer, but all of our rules are like, when you arrive from reserve, you get sustained hits and ignores cover. You get to use these strats. And the truck is not arriving from reserves. It is just disembarking from a truck. So it's a little anti-synergistic there. We also saw a little bit of points drop on aberrants. Everybody likes aberrants. I'm a big fan of aberrants. I don't think I'm running 20 all of a sudden, but my 10 points back on the 10 I had, I am a big fan of that. Ridge Runner coming down, you're still probably going to run 1, maybe 2. I think largely GSC is kind of the same. If you want to try to make that truck build an option, you can explore it, especially if you ally in those guard. You can get a lot of transports on the table, but 90 points is the point where I can look at the truck. 110 was like insulting. So it's not like this truck is all of a sudden very cheap. It's just like, okay, it's a unit I can look at now.
Yeah. Before you could not look at it.
Yeah, before we just
it was
played without
disgusting
that.
to look at.
Yeah, it was insulting. It was like, what do you mean I'm going to pay 110 points for this rhino? But it's 35 points for what? What am I getting for this rhino?
Aesthetics.
It anti-synergizes with all my data sheet rules. What are we talking about? With that said, I still think GSC is a strong army. I think it's got some fundamental problems. It has weird weaknesses. Anti-deep strike auras, sticky objectives are very bad for it, and it's got a transport problem.
Armies with like big base size stuff that blocks the objectives,
Yeah.
so you can't really contest them.
Yeah, they're really good at picking up Eldar. Like, my God, I love my Eldar matchup, and some other matchups are fine.
Yeah, their damage output really didn't decrease much.
No.
They've got less stuff, but they're like, when a unit of bombs comes down and hits you,
Something's dying.
something is just dead. Like, very few armies in the game just have, I guaranteed you're dead. Don't worry about it.
They struggle to blow people out, and that's because they don't play turn 1. They don't land on objectives against good players on turn 2 because you block out those objectives. I have to show up even 3 inches away off of the objective. It means I'm not scoring primary realistically beyond my home field until like turns 3 or 4 unless I infiltrate aberrants onto an expansion objective, which you can do, but it's a little hard to like really turn that into a differential upon your opponent. So they're much more of like a play tight game and win by a little bit type of faction. And then within that, they have some challenges because of, like we talked about, anti-deep strike wars and painful overwatches and transports. I think B tier is a good place for them.
Yeah, I agree. They still have some very good rules. Their coming back to life is inconsistent now. And sometimes I've seen Nick literally never get a single unit back in a whole game. Other times, you get 5 units back.
It's very all or nothing. It's not 50-50.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that way.
But it is B tier, for sure.
Yeah.
Next we have the Spacewolfs.
So, Wolf Jail was hype, but let's see where it lands. So, once again, we're not going to be ranking this based on whether it's a Space Wolf Gladius, which is actually a legitimately solid army, especially with the points decreases last time around. We're going to be ranking it based on Champions of Rust, which is their unique index detachment. And in my opinion, it is the absolute worst detachment in the game.
What?
Even worse
We were
than
talking about the AdMech one.
I think it's actually worse than Cybernetica, because Cybernetica can still just ignore that you're taking Cybernetica and instead take other stuff. But if you're playing Champions of Rust, you're this Space Wolf player. It's the one detachment you have access to. You don't have other ones. You don't have a codex. You have this. Right?
You have all your Gladius.
You have Gladius and stuff, but I'm saying as a Space Wolf unique player that buffs Space Wolf things, you have this. And this is a detachment in which you have to go out of your way to try and have your characters and various things achieve certain goals, which probably are only happening maybe turn 3.
Yeah, it's not like the goals are very hard to hit. These are the sagas to unlock your rules.
Maybe they're going to happen turn 3, but probably like turn 4 or 5, in which case you get it for maybe a round or 2. And the benefit is a mediocre buff that you could get in any other army basically on a data sheet.
Like lethal hits.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is horrible. I cannot believe that in January when they adjusted it, it was just so slight. This detachment is absolutely C tier, for sure. It is horrible.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Is it dog tier for dog poop? I mean, I think Space Wolves are still made of Space Marines, right?
They still have Space Marine data sheets. That's the only thing that's going to hold them up here.
Yeah.
They have cheap things like Fenrisian wolves and whatever, but like the detachment rules themselves are so poor. It's
Now,
insane.
with that said, I want to acknowledge that there is a lot of success going on with Thunderwolf Cav spam in the Stormlights detachment, specifically on the West Coast.
Yes.
In certain player-placed terrain formats, or where you can actually maneuver your Thunderwolf Cav around the table effectively, you're really great stats per point.
3 points per model on that is insane.
It's great defense, great movement, great offense for its points. It's awesome.
+1 damage.
+1 damage. The only challenge with it is a 60 mil base on a unit, and like if you're playing in the WTC format, you're not moving anywhere.
You're like,
but
ooh, I'm move block permanently.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yes, and you could run a Space Wolf Gladius, and it's probably very similar.
It's actually very good.
To
It is.
like a Black Templar Gladius, like swap out Hellbrick for like Logan Grimnar. I don't know, but
Yeah.
like you just like it's the same army in Space Wolves instead of Templars. But that's not what we're doing here. We're specifically ranking it on the uniqueness of Space Wolves and the uniqueness of Champions of Rust. That part is not that exciting.
No.
But you are still made of, at the end of the day, Inceptors and Assault Intercessors and just good units.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
there's only so far you can bring that, but I still think that, I think Hunter Cohort AdMech would consistently beat Champions or us, Space Wolves. I legitimately believe that.
Let's get it on the stream.
We have.
We have. All right,
Quinn was forced to suffer through that. And I didn't beat him with Hunter Core. I beat him with one of the worst attachments.
Quinn's never really taken off with his saga yet.
Well, he was put into some tough. He was forced to play Champions of Russ, and you see where his Space Wolf passion is.
He also got stuck into the Demon matchup, and that was quite.
So we have put Champions of Russ. We have tried it. It is just the player skill that Quinn can bring doesn't matter at all.
The reason when we show Space Wolves now, it's almost always not Champions of Rust. We would like
so
to.
I imagine next data slate they do another buff to it because it just needs it.
All right, let's keep it rolling. On to World Eaters.
World Eaters.
They got buffed. They saw some slight point decreases. I tell you, they can't make up their mind with if they want to buff this faction or nerf this faction.
It's funny because January they got a variety of nerfs, some of them to their actual rules.
Yeah.
And it's because it's an army that doesn't have an overwhelming win rate, but at the top of the meta where really good World Eaters playing.
Yeah.
They can be oppressive into certain factions, and not only oppressive, but random things can happen like, oh, my 400-point model comes back, and now it's going to Rapid Ingress and kill you when you didn't expect it.
They also have take a battle shock test or you can't fall back, which is in a lot of factions more or less 50-50, 1/3, 2/3 that you pass that, but no rerolls on that. You fail it, you're just game boned.
You're just stuck with the Exalted 8-bound saying hi.
Exactly. There's huge swing components to that match, to the World Eaters faction, right? Like, does Angron just come back or not? When does he come back? Do I fail that battle shock test? And then I've watched a lot of World Eaters players be like, I failed that 5-inch charge, which
Which
your
literally
armies-
our round one. I was watching Alex McDougall was playing GSC into World Eaters. The guy failed 2 5-inch charges and was just like, well, that is going to be brutal.
So there's just moments with World Eaters where you can only do so much besides, let's just roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah, blood god, blood dice for the blood god.
Blood dice for the blood god. But at the same time, as the opponent of World Eaters, let's look at what they got. Let's look at what they bring to the table. They're incredibly fast, like lightning fast. They scout, they can be +2 move, they can advance and charge, they have auto 6-inch advance, they are fast. Angron can be +1 to charge as well. They are so incredibly hard hitting, +1 strength and attack on the charge, all their stats are awesome. Angron is flat damage 6 or something, you are just going to die.
3 Exalted 8-bound just picks up a Dread Knight. Just
In combat matchups, they have the always strikes first unit of Khorne Berserkers joined by a Master of Executions, which is such a challenge to deal with. And for shooting matchups, that thing blood surges at you, so even shooting it can be incredibly difficult. And then not only that, but there's rhinos, transports just really help combat armies function, and they have the ability to fight on death on a 4+ with another blood god roll, which functionally means even if they crash into your lines and you're a balanced force which has mixed arms, shooting them when they're that close to you is a little bit dangerous because they can blood surge right into you. Countercharging them can be a little bit dangerous because they're fighting on death. It is such a dangerous matchup to try to get your hands gritty with. If you're playing against non-skilled World Eaters players and they don't know how to maximize all of their different rules and the minutia of pile-ins, consolidates, heroic intervention, conventions, CP management. Those are all skills you have to develop to play the army. If you haven't developed them, you're going to see these not so impressive results, and it won't be that bad to play against it. But let me tell you, as someone who's played against players like Anthony Vanilla, it is horrifying. Like, you know, like the things they can do with this army is really something else. So if you're like, if we're doing this from a maximum potential perspective, which we are, I think they've got to go into A tier despite, you know, the nerfs.
Yeah,
and the
we didn't even mention their
volatility.
defense. They have access to -1 damage in combat and 5 of pain on a lot of their army.
Bro, every single game, every turn, they all pick 5 of Feeling of Pain, and then I swear that's like not a 5 of Feeling of Pain. That's a 3 of Feeling of Pain. This army just
it's
doesn't
into
die.
5 of invulns usually, then 5 of pain, multi-wound models. They just soak up a lot more damage than you would think.
You put 15 8-bound in front of you, you're like, all right, this is not that bad. And then all of a sudden you killed 4. You're like, what was my turn? No,
So,
they're awesome.
Yeah, I think they're amazing.
Yeah, very strong army there. And it's cool. I've played 40k for 20 years, right? I've never seen World Eaters be as good as they are lately. They've really figured out a way to make a combat-only, limited data sheet faction, thematic, fun to play, and actually strong, which has not been done before, so that's pretty cool too.
Pretty rare. But like I said, it is mostly the top players carrying the World Eaters.
Definitely, definitely. They don't have a large player base.
Yeah,
but
they have a relatively small one.
that is what it is. You know who's got a larger player base? The Astra Militarum.
All right, so Astra Militarum is a faction that received quite possibly the most significant points increases out of any of the factions in the last MFM. So they have some of their indirect pieces, like the Medusa Carriage, the Manticore went up as well, the Basilisk went up. So a lot of the key indirect pieces that you saw. In addition, Kasrkin went up 20 points for 10, and that was a unit that was taken of 3. And was a solid damage dealer, but mostly for the go back into reserves with reinforcements and come back down onto the field. In addition, they also had Bulgrin, which was their main board control element, also go up, I believe, 10 points for 3, 20 for 6. So I think John's like guard archetype went up maybe like 160 or so points.
They keep jacking that up, yeah.
That's significant. That's significant. So, Guard as a whole performed reasonably well in the last meta. Top Guard players were able to win events with them. The average Guard player still performing below average. So they have a very wide gap between the experienced players and the regular players. And I think that gap will continue because it's not the easiest army to play. There's a lot of synergies within the faction that you have to be on top of. A lot of auras and giving out the proper orders to the different things that need them. So it's not the easiest army to play, but it has strong tools. Indirect keeps getting more expensive, but still, indirect is a big part of what the army does. However, at the same time, they got some points decreases here, and things like Scions have gone down, might end up replacing the Kasrkin in those lists. And in addition, Lehman Russes went down in a significant way, and John thinks that a Lehman Rush build could potentially be on the table.
A Lehman Rush.
A Lehman Rush, because it's a lot of chassis
like
that are
Lehman
high
Russes.
durability, 2-up save. They're not that easy to kill, and they do a good amount of damage, especially when they have redundancy. So while Guard are nerfed, I still think they're going to be a quite solid faction. They don't really blow out armies.
No, I think one of the challenges to Guard, and this is with them playing against them, is that they do what they do, and it's hard to stop it, and it's hard to improve it. By that I mean like they have a lot of stuff in midfield, Bulgrin, Kasrkin, Chimeras with dudes in them, and it's like, and Lehman Russes are probably going to add to that mix to make up for the artillery price hikes. And you're basically just got this lot of midfield push, but you're not really fast, you don't really fly, and you're not going to get behind your opponent unless you're able to like blow out their backfield screens and get behind them through like late game strategic reserves. That is only sometimes feasible. A lot of times if your opponent can keep you in front of them, you're just stuck in front of them and you can't progress past midfield. And likewise, your opponent is trying to get into your artillery castle, which is like one of their win conditions. If you move away from that artillery castle, it's less so, but still getting through the Guard army, capturing the outpost, denying their 5-point primary objective, like that is a huge task from a strategic standpoint in the Guard matchup, because so much of it is just slamming in the middle and you're both like killing each other off of midfield objectives. So any advantage you can get there is really good, but it's both hard for the Guard player to push beyond the midfield for them, and it's hard for you to push beyond the midfield there, so you end up with a lot of really close games.
Yeah, it's very often that Guard wins like a 13-7, a 12-8
best,
type,
yeah.
like at the best.
And like similarly, the losses are not really going to be like 4s and 5s, but the losses are still the 7-13 or the 8-12. This is teams talk, but these are like minor losses, minor wins. And while that doesn't really matter, it's hard to have control over that beyond a certain point, because it's kind of like, what match did I get? Did I roll good shots on this random shot weapon? Did he hit a 9-inch charge out of reserve? That kind of stuff can really swing. And in a team setting, that's not the biggest deal, but in a singles environment, one bad swing can cost you the whole tournament. So
I think Guard are also one of the armies that really wants to go first.
Yeah,
they
love
are
going first.
stronger going first because they get to get up and stage and not be stage on. So I feel we ranked them lower than others in the last update, and I still think they're probably an upper B tier army. I think they're like
I was going to say mid B tier. I don't know if they're as good as Chaos Space Marines.
I think they're as good as Votann.
Yeah. Okay. Votann sounds right. Like I'll put them there. They can hang with Votanns.
I think player skill can bring a lot out of them, but it's not an easy army to play at all. And
I'll also acknowledge it has a big swing factor. There's a lot of matchups that can just get ruined if the guard player goes first, shoots the Manticores, they roll hot, the Rhinos die in their deployment zone, the game's over. But
they're losing a lot of stuff. They
there's
go
like
that same archetype.
Yeah, right. That archetype is becoming more and more dinosaur style, and it's also not as reliable. Like, that's not really a game plan. That's like a hope.
Yeah.
So I think Guard in B tier seems perfectly fine. Next up, we've got the Aeldari. Now, this is another faction that just consistently gets nerfs as needed. But I think finally they are in the place where they probably need to be.
Yeah, I think they have finally, for the most part, not everything, it's still not perfect.
They still got Warp Fighters.
They still have Warp Fighters, they still got their Avatar.
Some things you just can't fix with points. Like, why do we just move 24 inches, shoot dev wounds, and then move again? Why are we doing that?
Because you got to do it. You got to do it.
You just got to do it.
So Eldar still have some really amazing tools. They've gone. A lot of their best things went up again, things that were taken in every list, and then they got decreases to stuff that basically wasn't seen whatsoever. So it's a net nerf to Eldar. But they have some options now. Striking Scorpions are a bit more interesting, especially giving another infiltrating presence, a little bit of counter assault.
It's also got a lot of depth in the codex. So, like, you know, we saw it used to be Incarns and Avatars after it was Wraith Knights, and then it was Wraith Guard, and then it was MSU. Now, I'm not trying to preach what I think it will be, but I'm sure there is good builds within this codex.
Yeah.
You're just too fast, too tricksy, too potent to not have good builds.
I think the player skill, just nature of Eldar, means that you can always take that faction, even as it goes up in points, and still perform with it. It isn't as consistent, and I think one of the biggest things that has hurt Eldar in the last couple months is the fact that Necrons have been everywhere and so strong, and that's consistently been one of Eldar's hardest matchups. So with Necrons floating towards the top, that's just a very difficult matchup for almost any Eldari player, regardless of skill. So I think that has suppressed their win rate a little bit more so than, even more so than the points increases, honestly.
Same thing. Sisters is another really challenging matchup for the Eldar, and it's become a little bit nicer on that front because Sisters got hit a little hard on the point side.
Yeah.
Not very hard, but, you know, anything to help that matchup. I think Eldar is still a very strong army. They do have that primary problem that Drukhari also have. Unless you take an Avatar or something similar in durability and buff it up with Fortune, you have nothing that is going to survive on an objective, nothing that's going to pretend to survive on an objective.
Warwalkers, baby.
Warwalkers are okay against some guns.
Yeah.
But largely speaking, you're trying to control primary through virtue of move blocking your opponent, isolating and destroying, so your opponent can't interact with an objective, as opposed to like you're going to survive on it. Like, you put a lone op an objective and never let anything get within 12 of it, it's going to be your objective. But that's more of a movement-based game plan than a durability-based game plan. And that's what you have to do, which really rewards that high-level play skill. I think an average Eldar player or a below-average Eldar player will really struggle to put up results now, because your primary is going to be trash. But I think if you're a great Eldar player and you've got a good plan for primary despite the lack of durability, you can still put up some great Ws.
Yeah. I think Eldar is very much, like, hilariously more of a player skill faction now.
Yeah, it's really
Where
true.
it used to be just, I win games because I'm playing Eldar. Now it is, I have to outplay people, but I have the tools to do it.
It's always tried to be that. It just often misses.
It often just is, this is too powerful.
Yeah.
It often errs on that side too much.
So for pretty much the entire edition, Eldar has lived in S tier, and I think last time was the first time we put it into A tier. Do you think it's still in A tier, or are we moving it to think down?
I think it's still an A tier.
Alright,
I think it
it's
is
still an
100% better than Votann or
CSM.
the other ones.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not
just there.
dramatically better than them. It just has better tools.
I think the low end of A tier is the right spot. It's not. It can punch up to S tier if you're better than them. It can punch within A tier if you're better than them. It will struggle if they're better than you or it's equal.
I think you
skill.
put it above Tyranids.
Yeah, I think they're like dead even.
Yeah,
Like,
they're right next to each
They're right
other.
next to each other. You know, but we can put them front, behind. Don't matter to me. And then next we've got the Jack Templars, not to be confused with the Black Templars.
So, Black Templars are an army that has one of the highest win rates in the game and has had that for the last couple months and in multiple different detachments. So, the most popular ones are, like I said, the Ironstorm and the Gladius versions of Black Templars, which are being judged by the Space Marine symbol. So we're going to judge Black Templars here based on Righteous Crusaders, which is their unique detachment. And in that detachment, they have multiple different styles. There is a body-heavy style that leans heavy on durability, large breaks of Crusaders. There's an MSU style that has a lot of the MSU Crusaders and Pulsars, all the different Gladiator tanks that you can bring.
Yeah.
Doesn't do it as well as the Ironstorm, but can still perform pretty reasonably well. You get the feel no pain. And then there is also a Punch You style with, you know, some amount of like Land Raiders, get up the table, deposit Sword Brethren, and hit your opponent as hard as possible, turn 2 onward.
Multiple distinct builds, like Horde of Dudes got hit a little bit, but still there. Gladius Classic is still there. Add some Land Raiders is still there. Or just switch the script and do Ironstorm and shoot people off the planet is still there. Like, this is the definition of multiple viable builds. Then you look at the win rates and you're like, wow, this thing is beating up everybody. And let's look at it from maximum potential. Okay, it's got like all of the rules, all of the data sheets, all of the flexibility. It can literally do all of it.
Yeah, Righteous Crusaders is just a fantastic detachment, and I think it is very solidly A tier, in my opinion. It's not quite as good as Black Templar Ironstorm or Black Templar Gladius. I think those two are the strongest versions.
Right.
So I think Unique Black Templars is like middle of A.
Yeah.
But it is still a detachment that benefits player skill, has multiple different styles, and is just strong into the other meta builds.
So this is where we're gonna
Like,
have to
think about Necrons, like with their Canoptic Horde and, you know, wraiths and stuff. The Black Templars are tailor-made to be awesome into that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to decide whether or not we want to like elevate them to S tier. Honestly, as our first S tier contender, because I know we said we're gonna stick with Righteous Crusaders as their detachment for the jurisdiction, but like when you put them in these other detachments, they really go up to like one of the most winning armies in the games. Do we want to factor that in?
We can. I still think Space Marines being like number 1 or 2 in A is factoring that in. I think Space Marines are just on the cusp of too strong.
Yeah.
In the hands of the top players, but I don't think they're quite there. I think with the successive points increases, they are just one of the best A tier armies.
That's true. I think as we actually populate this S tier, I think it'll become apparent that there are some real big offenders out there.
Yeah.
So let's put this guy at the top of A tier. I think in front of regular Space Marines, but like they're kind of just acknowledging that Templars.
Well, no, if you want, well, like that's
You want to? Sure. Okay.
it's just judging Righteous Crusaders.
All right.
So it'll be
where you
like
will.
middle of the pack there.
Okay. So we've got another super chat from Nathan Sims over here. $2, 2,100 points of guard this weekend at a GT, and went 3 and 2. Really awesome performance. Nice 3-2 finish there. Thank you so much for your support, Nathan. Appreciate
Thank you so much. Great job with the guard.
So now we've got the Orks, the WOG, the coolest and greenest and meanest and newest and shiniest army on the streets. And man, are they good.
They are one of the best design codexes internally in that you have almost every detachment is competitively viable and buffs a wide variety of units. You can, if you have a favorite unit in the Orc book, there is a detachment where you can run it and feel great about it.
One thing I think is really interesting is when I look at like the NID Codex and I look at John's Invasion Fleet build versus his Nexus build versus his Endless Swarm build, is they're all kind of the same. and then he like swaps a little data sheet here or there. But then I look at the Orc Codex, and I look at the Speed Freak build, or the Green Tide build, or the Bully Boys build. They are so dramatically different. They are all trying to do very different things, and they're very specialized. And it's a really cool way to handle a codex that has like a ton of different types of data sheets, is really give each attachment some unique flavor and stuff. But from a competitive standpoint, Bully Boys, Green Tide, and the Orc shooty one, the Death Dread one, Dread Mob, those are standouts. They are so strong. The Dread Mob, I have to see it on the table still, but the math on that thing is nutso.
Killican's just blowing you
the
up.
The clanking claws blowing you up. But then the Mega Knobs, we put them on the table. I know you've experienced them firsthand, Siegs, and they are brutally durable.
What if instead of a 4-up invuln, 5-up Phenopain, 4 wounds, you had 3 wounds with a 2-up save, 5-up invuln, 4-up Phenopain, 2 turns out of the game.
Are you comparing race to Mega Knobs?
Basically. They are basically the Wraith of the the Orc book. And man, Orcs hit a lot harder than Necrons in close combat, but them also having some insane durability means it's really hard to shake them off.
Well, it's the combination of the fact that the Bully Boys detachment gives them 2 turns of log, and their data sheet ability gives them 4 Feel of Pain. So it's not just that they get 4 Feel of Pain for 2 battle rounds, which is already nuts. But it's also they get +1 strength, +1 attack, and advance and charge for 2 battle rounds. And that solves the speed issue Mega Knobs have. That solves the attack issue on their profile data sheet that Mega Knobs have. And the strength, I don't think you needed it, but like it's there. And it's there for everybody else in your army too.
The other thing is that Orcs are already a good army. I believe we ranked them A tier last time. They play the mission supremely well because they put so much pressure on you in your half of the board that it's hard to deal with their primary. They just rack up primary. They're just a really high point scoring army. And on top of that, they then just have Gretchen or Storm Boys doing actions because they can take fixed, they can take cards, doesn't really matter. They score points regardless. And they're one of the best armies for creating a differential between primary.
Yeah. And it forces,
and this book does it.
You can't really adopt a strategy against Orcs of like, I'm going to just score points and kind of ignore you. They put their army in your deployment zone turn 2. You can't ignore it. So now you're not doing your cleanse and homers or whatever you're doing. You can't even approach it that way because you know you have to fight the battle right in front of you if you want any chance to win the war. Meanwhile, there's Grots just running around just doing all of the Orc things that need to be doing for secondary. So they're dominating on primary and secondaries. It very much becomes a battle of can you maintain a foothold on primary by maybe overloading a flank, or can you isolate and destroy sections of them while screening effectively. It's very hard to play against Orcs. And this isn't just Bully Boys. Like the original Wog Tribe detachment is still potentially even the best one. But it just got better by virtue of the data sheets changing within the Orc Codex. And then there's also the Green Tide, which is a unique set of challenges similar to like Endless Swarm and Tyranids. But it's got build diversity, it's got depth, and it's very hard to play against.
Yeah, the thing about Orcs is, at the end of the day, it's gonna take months for people to really figure out all the different builds because this is such a deep book, and it's going to probably change based on what the meta around them is. Dread Mob being better on lighter terrain versus, Bully Boys and Green Tide being super good on denser terrain formats. So I think we're gonna see a wide variety. I think it's gonna be very much like Necrons, where Necrons have Canoptic Court, Hypercrypt, and then Awakened Dynasty is a bit below that. I think Orcs are going to have that same thing, where they're going to have multiple detachments that all perform supremely well.
I think we have our newest member of the S tier.
I think because they didn't receive really many points increases from the MFM to Codex. Yeah, they need data. I think that they have a lot of undercosted units that will eventually go up over time. And I think because they were already a really good mission-playing army, they have even better tools to do that now. They're just going to be in a great place for a while. And they're probably going to get some amount of nerfs over the successive, next 6 months, I think. I'd be shocked if they didn't.
One would hope. Not the Orc players. Maybe the Orc players do want nerfs. I don't know.
But, I think Orcs are here to stay, and they're going to be in your meta all over the place.
Not all over the place.
All over the place.
You know who else I think is really strong that no one's really talking about, though?
Oh, yeah?
The Dark Angels.
The Dark Angels. John has come around to the Dark Angels.
This was another one where the initial take was that they're not that great, but through trial and error and actually playing games with the army and learning to master them, you find hidden gems and you make it work.
In addition, the MFM gave them some important decreases, especially on Deathwing Knights. And so Even though Dark Angels haven't got tons of love, they've mostly been seen in Dark Angels Ironstorm lists, where basically it's you take Azrael and the Dark Shroud and you jam it into a typical Ironstorm list. That's been their most popular like detachment on the tournament scene, and that's not really Dark Angels.
Right.
So once again, we've shown you what those type of detachments are going to be ranked on. We're going to rank it on the unique Dark Angels detachments, and the Terminator one is probably the strongest one, especially because the Deathwing Knight decrease here. The Ravenwing one it's tough to run that many bikes. It's really hard to hide. It's not that easy to move them. They have some interesting
Their
mechanics.
offense also isn't that great.
Their offense is a little lackluster, but I think the Terminator build, having -1 damage Terminators, especially with something like Trajan going out of the meta, not every Necron player running Silent King, stuff like that, they basically act as Bulgrin, but with 2-up saves, and they hit a bit harder.
Yeah.
Like, that is just good. And I expect that we're going to see it a decent amount in the coming months. So Dark Angels fans, start testing it out. There's actually a game where I just played the Scorpic Destroyer Awaken Dynasty into new updated Dark Angels. And even though John played the Gladius in that one, he wants to play the Terminator detachment in the coming weeks.
I think the Terminators are getting a free pass for absolutely no reason. They are incredibly hard to kill. We're talking like great on clean one levels of hard to kill. -1 to wound, or -1 damage,
-1 damage, yeah.
Plus the 4 wound models, like I hate them. I hate them so much. The Armor of Contempt on the 2-up save, I hate it. I hate it so much. And then they get extra AC, and then they just stay on the objectives, and then you can't do anything about it, and then like how do you win the game if you can't do anything about it?
One of the great tricks with them is there's an enhancement to, I believe it's Pile-In or Consolidate 6, and so you can do amazing things with heroic intervention plays with them and getting them onto objectives and preventing your opponent from denying you primary. There's a lot of just tricky things you can do with that detachment. So I actually think Dark Angels are probably like middle of B tier, honestly. I know we ranked them like low B tier maybe last time. I think they're actually a bit higher.
The Dark Angel detachment is solid, and more than the detachment, their data sheets are great.
They have some very, especially with the points decreases, that really helped them out a lot.
Strong data sheets there. You know what else has got a lot of unique data sheets? Deathwatch. Now, why don't they get love? That's the real question.
So, Deathwatch were completely ignored in this update. When every Space Marine chapter received points decreases on their Terminators, Deathwing is the only, Deathwatch is the only one that did not receive anything. In addition, they're performing abysmally in the Black Spear detachment for the last several months. They received one of the most significant nerfs the game has ever seen when their Stratagem Suite was nerfed. In addition to points increases on their key units. So none of those points decreases have come back down, which is surprising to me. In addition, so like Proteus kill team, etc., and then and the basic kill teams, but also their stratagems, especially the ones that are based around their special issue ammo, only work on basically they're not good weapons.
Yeah.
It works on regular bolt weapon, nothing special. And because of that, their damage output in their unique detachment is actually quite low. Now, Deathwatch in the Vanguard Space Marine detachment is actually a pretty solid army. It's not as good as Vanguard Ultramarines, but it's solid enough. You can teleport Centurions around. You got the Watchmaster to have a unit advance and shoot, advance and charge. That's pretty solid. But at the same time, in the Black Spear detachment, because the 3 strats on special issue ammo don't really do anything, you're effectively taking this detachment to get access to the unique kill teams, of which the Proteus and the basic kill team are the only really good ones, because the other ones haven't come down in points. And in addition to that, there are 3 strats you get: go back into reserve, which Vanguard can just do. You have Armor of Contempt, which Vanguard can just do. And then you have put your unit into a different Deathwatch doctrine. It's cool enough, they have some good enhancements, but is that enough to justify a whole detachment?
What's interesting is in our Discord server, actually, I was reading through the Deathwatch channel, and I expected a lot of doom and gloom. But one of the cool things is one of our dedicated Deathwatch players was actually doing some quick maths, as we do, and they were determining that Deathwatch are one of the premier armies for actually shooting Orks off of the table if you stack all the rules against them. So we did just put out Orks in S tier, so you might find some niche usage of Deathwatch as a Ork counter in teams, or it's just like a let's tech for the meta type of thing. I mean, let's not sugarcoat it too much. Deathwatch needs some love and attention, and I'm really sad that they didn't get it. And ultimately, I think their rule suite leaves a lot to be desired, and their points costs are kind of egregious for how much output these units have.
Yeah, especially with the stratagems not working on most of the weapons that they really want it to be working on. So personally, I think the Black Spear detachment is in C tier.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it is around that Space Wolf AdMech area where, yes, you can play Gladius or Vanguard with Deathwatch and perform pretty well with it. That's significantly better than C. Still Space Marines. But the unique detachment, just the data sheet, the Watchmaster's good. Proteus Kill Team's good but overcosted. Kill Team is good, overcosted. And then the other ones just basically don't do anything relevant.
Right.
It's unfortunate.
So what's very fortunate, though, is we've got some fitting $10 super chats from John Edwards. Love the streams, fellas. For Deathwatch, what can a Deathwatch main player do to try to be competitive? Also, unofficially speaking, you guys think these lack of changes means we might get folded? I don't think so. Unofficially, of course, I really have no idea. I don't think that is what makes the decisions for whether or not armies go to Legends or whatever. I think that's more of a time issue and a supply chain thing. But I truly have no idea. In terms of what can Deathwatch players do to be competitive? Any ideas, Seeks?
Yeah, it is not take the Black Spear detachment. It is decide whether you want to play Gladius or Vanguard. Both of them work. Basically, look at John's Vanguard Space Marine archetype, take those exact data sheets, get rid of Marnius Calgar, put a Watchmaster in, and get rid of Uriel Ventress and decide on some other thing to do, maybe a second Watchmaster, maybe upgrade a unit to a kill team. But effectively, you're basically playing that archetype, but with some amount of unique Deathwatch data sheets. You could do the Gladius version as well and play a bit more of a board control centric style, but effectively you kind of have to leave the Black Spear behind because it just doesn't do enough compared to some of those other detachments. But basic Space Marines and running the good data sheets and the good rules in Vanguard or Gladius will get you a decent, you'll still win games with them. They're not abysmal. It's Black Spear itself just doesn't do enough.
Thanks so much for your super chat, John Edwards. Now we got a $5 super chat from Chris. For Templars, do Lancers make sense outside of an Ironstorm detachment, or is 170 just too much? How many tanks is too many Sword Brethren now? How many is too many Sword Brethren? Thanks.
So thanks so much for the super chat. I think you still want to go with the 15 Sword Brethren.
That's a good
5
number.
by 5 by 5.
I wouldn't go past that.
Yeah, I think 3 5-mans, you get the captains and Helbricht inside, and you're still doing good. Yes, it went up in points, but it's still really good for the points you're paying. And then what was the other
For
part?
the Lancer.
The
outside
Lancer,
of Ironstorm.
I've been unimpressed with the Lancer, honestly. It's solid enough as a tank. Like, AdMech would just take the Lancer, because they don't have that role. But I honestly think that you still go for the Land Raider, Redeemer, Eradicators, etc. as your anti-tank and your board pressure.
I've never been impressed with the Soul Lancer either. I think you can.
I think
do
Eradicators
better.
are significantly better, personally.
You can also just punch tanks to death. I get the idea that guns make your opponent play differently, but not that
It doesn't have the
differently.
volume, really.
Yeah.
It has the rerolls, so it's relatively efficient, but its durability is quite poor, honestly.
So then we've got Bobby Soto, who just gifted 5 Warhammer 40k memberships. Thank you so
Bobby.
much, Bobby. And
If you want to see AdMech put somebody in jail, check out my stream game against Bobby at the... No. Sorry, Bobby.
Well,
Bobby is amazing. He's a lobster, okay? He's awesome.
he's a lobster. We love the lobsters. Uriel's Brickheck, hope I didn't butcher that, with a 10-pound super chat. I was painting a mech guardless 4 to 6 chimeras plus Kajins, love those, with tanks in the back. Do you think this would be viable in the new meta? Thanks in advance and keep doing what you do. I do. I think Kajin chimeras is like a really good way to play guard, and tanks in the back is still fine. I honestly would put more tanks up front. We're talking those Lehman Rushes as we were talking about, but Kajins in Chimera is like 125 points of value. OC2, grenades, bodies, tank, good stuff.
You got flamers around.
Flamers. That's like the bread and butter for how you score points and play mission in Warhammer. And you can wrap transports. This is good stuff all around.
Yeah, I think it gives you tons of tools to play the mission. You probably don't want an indirect castle. You want more tanks that can get direct line of sight because your opponent's going to step out to shoot your chimeras. You then step out your tanks to respond with your Demolisher tank commander and your other, Lehman Russes.
Tim Mellings just became a bronze member of the Warhammer. Thanks so much, Tim. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Welcome.
All right, Siegs. Next up is Necrons.
All right, so the Necrons. They were clear S tier. They are one of the winningest factions in the last several months. They basically, since Eldar has gone down and CSM was nerfed, Necrons have taken over the mantle of the most winning army in the game, and they do it with multiple detachments. Both Canoptic Court and Hypercrypt perform extremely well, and they have received some points increases. But frankly, I don't think it was anywhere near enough. I think a lot of the armies around them went up like 60, 70, 80 points. And like Guard went up, potentially 100 plus, depending on your list. Necrons went up about the same, depending on your list. Honestly, Hypercrypt lists went up generally a bit more than Canoptic Court, and I think that was not correct.
I think it's a little insane to me that rates themselves didn't go up. I understand that rates, the data sheet outside of Canoptic Court, are not that impressive. You need the Technomancer to make it work, and the Technomancer went up 25 points, which is not insignificant. But like the fact that the Wraith unit still exists with 4 wounds and 5 of penal pain, and still does the thing, and still gets reactive moves, all that's still there. They didn't really change that. You just get slightly less of it. And they were so oppressive that I don't know that slightly less was enough. The Nightbringer getting slammed for 40 was nice. I wish they just kind of applied that logic across more units in the Codex. Doomstalkers getting away scot-free was also like, what are we doing?
Yeah, so my list that I took went up 90 points, and if I cut the Nightbringer, I just have a whole swath of points available, and I don't really care at all. I get the same list plus more stuff.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I think Necrons received an extremely light touch, and which means that they're still going to win a lot of stuff. They're still going to be all over the meta.
Do we still think they're S tier? Do we think that they can hang with Orks and the likes of the newest, greatest?
I think Hypercrypt is A tier, but Canoptic Court is S tier. I think Canoptic Court is just too strong.
It's just so good.
It's too strong. It probably is the fact. The thing is, you give a 12-inch lone op strat to any Canoptic unit, whereas a lot of the lone op strats in other factions that are like that are restricted to very particular data sheets.
Yeah.
Instead of I can put on anything that is Canoptic, which is a very large swath of units.
It's also it rewards you for holding the objectives in terms of detachment ability, and your army's very good at holding the objectives, and if you're holding the objectives, you're winning, and you're getting better, and it's just it wins so hard when it's up.
Yeah, the issue is that it combines durability with pretty darn good damage.
And
not the best damage in the game.
Slow. That reactive move is great.
Not slow. You've got a lot of tools. The thing is, the Necron Codex is so well designed that you have options everywhere. For whatever you need, you can just fit in. And they got decreases to things like Scorpic Destroyers, Flayed Ones, etc. that are going to start finding their way into lists because they offer tools that are very accessible and important. So I think Scorpecs are going to be back. Certainly in Awakened Dynasty, they can fit in Canoptic Court because it's just an efficient data sheet. And Scorpecs actually beat up Wraiths quite efficiently. And if you run the Scorpic Lord, you can snipe out the Technomancer. I think Necrons just have a lot of build types and are still going to be very strong, but I think Canoptic Court is the one that is still
there.
Too strong.
Yeah.
It is too strong because it's too easy to play compared to some of the other very good armies.
It can also be incredibly oppressive. You have to be an amazing player with the right army to have a game into Canoptic Court.
So, just the example, we went to the team tournament, right? I took Canoptic Court, and for the most part, almost all my matchups were positive, and a lot of my matchups were, if things go my way, I'm going to just slam a huge win.
Yeah.
And not many armies do that anymore.
No.
That used to be very common.
Games are much tighter.
Games are much tighter overall. You win games, you might win games consistently, but you win them by a small margin, less than 20 points.
Well, I think also, just looking at the team tournament for proof of that, there were more draws amongst the top teams than I've ever seen. Art of War 2 draws, Tundra Tactics had 3 draws. The way you get draws is by having close games across a spread of 8 games.
Yeah.
Close games are everywhere. Yeah. Necrons be slamming.
And I think certain archetypes, like the Silent King archetype, have the ability to just slam certain matchups, especially other A-tier armies, and I think it's going to be too strong, personally.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I think Necrons are still a cut above the rest. Not to say that A-tier armies can't still beat Necrons.
They do.
They definitely do.
They do.
But it's the ease with which Necrons play and the oppressiveness that it hits you with.
Especially for anything beat down just is problematic for, has problems into Canoptic.
Yeah.
Big problems.
Big problems. So then up next is Grey Knights, who did see some pretty hefty points nerfs on their latest and greatest build, the Dread Knight spam.
Yeah, so basically, before the January update, Grey Knights were a faction of Terminator janky plays. Deep striving, rapid ingress Terminators, objective control, teleporting away with mists, and very, very minimal shooting. On the other hand, with January, they actually, in the update, changed weapon profiles on the Dread Knight chassis for the Grandmaster and the regular Dread Knight, and didn't increase their points. So all of a sudden, they got a really effective shooting platform that's quite durable, has a really good data sheet rule, and effectively, they 4 Dread Knights minimum went into every Grey Knight list, and then around that, other things were taken.
Or you just ran 6.
More library. You could run 6.
Yeah.
You were seeing triple librarians still because they can do a lot of mortal wound output, although it's inconsistent. And effectively, Grey Knights ran very skew lists. Now they got some points increases. You went up 10 points on the Dread Knight chassis, which is not the end of the world at all. The Grandmaster didn't go up at all, which I think is totally fair. The Dread Knight, the basic Dread Knight's a lot better than him. And Librarians went up another 10 points. And then their like 5-man infantry units went down a bit.
Yeah.
So like the Strike Squad, the Purifiers, etc. That's not really relevant. I think the same build is basically going to exist. You just have to cut something somewhere because Imperial Agents also went up. But this build is kind of impressive, honestly.
Yeah.
It has a lot of shooting. It's a lot of 2-up save and cover. True Silver Armor is their Armor of Contempt equivalent. And they can still put out a decent amount of mortals. You could still run Terminators plus Dread Knights. You could run all Dread Knights and vehicles. You can run Land Raider Redeemers. There's a lot of like skew variety in Grey Knights right now. And I don't think this update really nerfs it in any significant way. So last time we ranked it as an A-tier army, and I still think it's one of the better A-tier armies.
Yeah.
It's downright oppressive into certain armies, frankly. It
Yeah.
has some weaknesses. World Eaters is actually crippling weakness on dense terrain. You just actually get destroyed by 3 8-bound, Exalted 8-bound just kills a Dread Knight. So they can very efficiently deal with it. But outside of that, like a lot of armies struggle, and it's a scary army to play against. It's got heavy incinerator flamers all over the place for any of your janky mission play type armies.
Right. I think Grey Knights in general is a strong army. It can keep it close with pretty much anything, and it can give almost anything an honest game. It struggles versus armies that can just overwhelm board control, get it in combat, blitz it. Orks, World Eaters, they can get the upper end on it. Canoptic Horde, I imagine, can do similar if it's just 18 rates, but
Yep.
anything else really has an uphill battle into Grey Knights, really.
It's difficult because they're teleporting around. They're 3.1 away. There's Miss. Miss is just a really hard strat to play around. So definitely really rewards player skill for sure.
For sure. Razile, who's been a member for 17 months, thank you. Do you guys think it's about time for a shake-up to missions in the tactical deck? If so, what changes, additions, subtractions would you wish for?
100% it is.
I'd love a mission shake-up. It's not even that I think the missions are bad. I just want a shake-up for the sake of it. I think there's a lot of missions that could use some work and refinement as well. Supply drop, deploy servo skulls. Those are some key offenders. There's others, but
Yeah.
some missions are really engaging and interesting. I quite like Scorched Earth, and then Take and Hold is classic. Vital Ground I've come to appreciate. There's some interesting stuff going on 10th, and I think just a little bit more refinement on the mission side instead of just the army side could go a long way to bring
Yeah,
up the
even
whole
small
meta.
stuff like the ritual is a very drawish, weird mission. I think incentivizing if you place the objective, in closer to your opponent's deployment zone, it's worth more points.
Yeah.
Stuff like that could go a long way to making those a little more engaging and interesting.
I'd love to see a little bit more refinement. I think they've got a lot of data and knowledge on what the missions are, how they feel, how they play. There's a lot of factors when 10th edition released. Obviously, all the armies got re-indexed, so that's its own variety of issues and challenges and things we have to balance. But then the missions are all brand new, and tactical cards, gambits probably need a rework, but
Just get rid of this.
I like the idea. I just don't think they hit it at all.
I think it should be a much smaller impact, but more consistent.
Yeah, and from my understanding, it's like the idea is like that you're in bottom of turn 5 and you're trying to throw the Hail Mary to steal the game, so you go for like the 100-yard pass. That doesn't really feel like what a gambit is to me right now.
So their design intent was that if you are fallen behind early, you have some mechanic to get back into the game, so you still play it.
Right.
So you still want to play all 5 turns, which
Right.
I think is a noble cause. That is actually a worthy goal. It just doesn't feel that at all.
Yeah. There could be some rework on certain aspects, but not to say the whole thing is all messed up.
I think they have a good core. They just need some refinements there.
Yeah. And then next we have Imperial Knights. Beautiful faction there, played by Brian Jones lately on our channel. We're getting some knight diversity up in there. They have seen a lack of love as well.
Yep, they actually got a nerf because the Imperial Agents went up, and they need Imperial Agents to function as an army.
True.
So they actually got a little bit of a nerf, not a huge one, but they already were. Their lists are at awkward point values because there's not flexibility there. You take your 2-3 big knights, you got a bunch of a couple armigers, and then your agents, and agents went up. Where you fill in those points?
It's really hard to adjust for small changes in points cost because your list fits together like puzzle pieces, and now it might just not fit, so you have to room an entire armiger, entire big knight, restructure the entire thing. It can be quite the bear to figure out a good flow of an army. Assuming you can even do that, and you do that as a player, your knight army is only going to take you so far. At the end of the day, it is a bit of a stat check. You're just presenting toughness 12 in mass of your opponent, sometimes with 6 upper for even 5 if feeling pain. Some armies can just handle that, and if you run into one of those armies, it can be just too uphill, literally snowboarding uphill.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Knights probably need another layer of buffs. They probably need some buff to the Bondsman ability. Maybe it doesn't affect the big Knights, but you get to pick multiple armigers and they increase the power of the enhancement in some way. Something like that to make the army a bit more synergistic and interesting, because right now it is very much a pile of stats.
I will say Knights are one of the hardest armies in the game to balance externally.
Yep.
And internally because of their data sheets or lack thereof. But externally, it's like if Knights are too good, it's probably means they're too tough or too killy, and your opponent, you need to swing that down. And if they're swung down, they're either still too good or not good enough, and it's very hard to actually balance that line where they are where they should be. I don't even know what that looks like, but right now I would say they're on the needs to be better spectrum.
Yeah, they are one of the most difficult armies to play because you just have so few resources. And every time I see Knights play, it's like they draw teleport homers, right, Nick? And to get teleport homers, you got to touch the terrain. And all of a sudden, you have the tough choice of like, do I go and get up here, touch the terrain, try and
Get shot at,
sacrifice a knight just for 3 points? Like it's just really difficult to make decisions with this army unless your opponent makes big mistakes.
Yeah. I think it can work at the lower end of tables where people don't have a strong list that can fail the stat checks against Knights, but at the top end, like the entire S tier and A tier will just brutalize Knights is what I'm looking at. I think they're a C tier army.
I think they're clear C tier as well.
Yeah.
Fitting in there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but like I said, I think they need to do more with Bondsmen and put less emphasis on the stats.
So only 2 armies left, and we're getting into some very hotly debated ones. We've got the Thousand Sons. All 1,000 of them.
Well, they are an army that started the edition with an immense amount of power.
You just had to figure it out, though.
They still have a lot of power, but they have less stuff on the board. They got some points increases on 2 enhancements, decreases on like cultists and some other little things. So they're net basically about the same, but the meta has gone down slightly around them.
So I think a truly fantastic Thousand Sons player, we're talking like the Liam VSLs, the Sean Nathans of the world, like the people who really put the time in and master the T-Zones, they're terrifying. Like they know the ins and outs, and it's an army full, not even of gotchas in an unsporting way, but gotchas in an experience way I was talking about, and like it's very hard to get quality reps against someone who's played the Thousand Sons 1,000 times, you know, like you're not going to know what to even know. And then on top of that, they have so many different play patterns. They can double move here, they can double move there, they can double doom bolt, they can strip away your armor saves. Sean was telling me this past weekend about how he had a rubric marine, like 5 rubric marines with a sorcerer type model, I forget which one. Once they strip armor saves, and he uses a combination of strats with Magnus to give them +1 and +1 a wound, sustained hits, and all of a sudden 5 models plus a sorcerer killed a land raider. And it's like, what even is this wizardry?
Yeah.
So like you have to be aware of that, you have to be ready for that. That's really taxing and challenging for your opponent. But this is, of course, only speaking of the highest level Thousand Sons. It is incredibly easy to, oops, I got my army all killed because you're 25 Space Marines and Magnus walking around a table.
Exactly, and as soon as you make mistakes, your cabal points go down. You don't have resources in the particular spaces of the board that are screening and doing all that stuff. So it's extremely hard to play, but when played really well, it is one of the best armies in the game, and it's scary for almost any of the top armies.
Yeah. I do think that Thousand Sons ultimately are, if we're going for max potential, one of the strongest armies in the game, but they are on a nice edge to losing unless you are literally that great of a player.
They're also a very time-intensive army because it's very challenging to play it as perfectly as you need to win games.
On a clock.
Exactly. So it can be very difficult to get that level of, perfection in a normal game.
It's one of those things where it's like a bit of a theoretical problem instead of an actual humanistic problem, because at the end of the day, humans are players make mistakes. Maybe if they made a deep blue for 40k, and then all of a sudden the algorithm was playing Thousand Sons, yeah, we're done. 40k is over, it's solved. But while there's the reality element to it, I do think Thousand Sons have some logistical challenges. Like a human, I know Sean was even telling me by round 5, he's like, I can't think anymore. Like my 5th round is not my 1st round in terms of how good I'm playing it. So that's a real thing. With all that said, if we're doing max potential, they are still seriously scary. Where do you think they should land?
Definitely in the top side of A, somewhere up there.
You don't think they're S tier?
I don't think so, because one mistake is extremely punishing. Whereas,
That's true.
I make a mistake with Necrons, I can at least recover from it. You make a mistake with Orks, you got other layers to your pressure. You make a mistake with Space Marines, it's decently punishing, so it's right around there.
Yeah, but you make a mistake with Thousand Suns.
It can be crippling. Thousand Suns have a higher upside, but then they're more punishing.
Yeah, and it's not even that like a good enough player doesn't make mistakes. Like everybody does make mistakes, and those mistakes are so punishing in Thousand Suns where it actually does hold you back a little bit.
Yeah, 100%.
Sure. And then there's also some matchups where Thousand Suns do actually struggle. Like they hate indirect fire.
They do hate it, but the meta has gotten more and more favorable because Guard just got another big set of indirect nerfs. The D cannon went up. That helps.
We ran this tier list back in like September, I'm sure, where Triple Night Spinner was the starting place for every single Eldar list, and Thousand Suns were like dropping into B tier because of it.
Yep.
It's like you just can't.
They still have the same rules as then, but it's just the meta's even more favorable.
Right. They also don't love getting blitzed. I know the Orc match and the World Leaders match is super dangerous. Thousand Suns can certainly win it. I've watched great Thousand Suns players like Vic dismantle the Orc army as it's crashing into them. But I really do feel like that matchup is on a knife's edge where if the Orc player maybe did it a little bit better or if factors were a little bit different, the T-Suns player just gets run over instead. So that's always tricky. Just there. It's very tricky. So this brings us to the last and final army, a Sieg's favorite, the Tau.
The Tau. So their codex has been out, not officially, but it has been released in the army box.
We've done a whole preview of it.
We have the rule. We've done a lot of stuff. We've done a full tier list of all the different units in the book. We've done a full codex review. I played a lot of games with the different detachments. So there's a lot of experience going in this. The only thing we don't have is the final points, which is certainly a question mark. When the official codex comes out, we will get those. So I'm going to give 2 different ratings for where I think roughly they will end up.
I'm going to give 1 because that's all we got right now.
What we have right now is that they are S tier 100%. They're one of the best armies in the game. Monka might be the strongest detachment in the game.
S tier Tau with Monka is just so real.
It's oppressive.
Like here's the fundamental problem. You play 3 turns where the first 3 turns where your army gets lethal hits, advance and shoot, and you have way too much stuff.
You get the advance and shoot all game.
Oh, you get even better.
You just get lethals.
So you get lethal hits
and some of the strats.
And you get access to like reroll hits, reroll wounds, all kinds of great rules to buff up your damage even beyond that. And then you look at the Tau points costs, and today they're like, oh, this army's not that good. Let's make it all really cheap. And then in the Codex, this army is fantastic because we added all these rules to it. Let's keep it really cheap because that's what we're working with today's points costs. And it's just nuts. And then on the table, it's like, okay, the first 3 turns, they're all buffed up, so I can choose to hide and play a KG game, wait for turns 4 and 5. But because they have so many units, they're dominating me on the mission. I'm like holding 1 objective, they're holding 4. I'm scoring maybe like a third of my secondary deck, and they're scoring 80% of theirs. It's like, we're not playing the same Warhammer for 60% of the battle rounds of the game. Then on turns 4 and turns 5, I can like mount the comeback where I'm down by 40 and there's still an unscathed Tau army in front of me, and maybe I've killed some Kroot and whatever, a Piranha, woohoo, and I still have to deal with all that, and it's just not happening, especially if I've gone first, because especially if you try to play the game, and whether you're incentivized to play the game because you're gone first, or it's just the mission, or you just want to play Warhammer, if you try to play the game, there's 3 turns, lethal hits, reroll hits, Moncov, wounds, whatever, you're getting tabled. Like, there's no army to play on turns 4 and 5, so you're stuck between a rock and a hard place with that one. I've not seen a single army able to dance the line of not getting tabled while scoring points well enough to actually win the
Broken
game.
Custodes.
Broken Custodes.
Broken Custodes were the only one barely to do it.
Yes.
But they don't exist anymore, so that's gone.
That's gone.
So why is it so good? Well, Tau previously relied on Kalyan, which was their index detachment, which meant you had to wait till turn 3 to get all your good rules, effectively. And so Tau needed to be priced such that if they lose a bunch of units, they still have some things in the late game to try and come back on points. Yeah. And so they kept getting decreases. Now Monka is literally the reverse of Kalyan, and Tau gained a lot of additional tools to help their early game pressure. So Monka has access to pick 2 units to scout, so you can pick anything, broadsides, riptides, doesn't matter what it is, you can pick 2 different things. In addition, you can still put pathfinders and devilfish, so you could just scout up a ton of devilfish right up the table and immediately turn to be in your opponent's deployment area, hitting them with breachers, pathfinders, etc., and putting a punishing amount of damage on them.
Right.
You have some of the best OC and objective control in the game with breacherfish. You have great damage profiles across the board in your battle suits and commanders. And finally, you also just have like tools for any situation. You've got great infiltrating and scout pressure. You've got very good defensive profiles, a lot of 4-up invulns, access to good toughness values. So I think Tau are the complete package. Basically, they don't have combat, but at the end of the day,
who needs one of the main phases of the game? Why would that be something we care about?
Well, the thing, so a lot of these armies at the top, especially the combat-oriented ones, part of their power is that they can get immediately behind terrain in the middle of the table and stage from there. Tau, with the speed they have in Monka, is actually able to get up and contest those places. A lot of shooting armies just kind of have to sit there and take it, trade screens and stuff. Tau can actually put a key resource right behind that terrain feature and be like, no, you're dead. You try and stage there, you're just dead.
They're just gone.
And that is going to elevate them a significant amount. So if they don't change in points, 100% F tier. If they do get points increases, we'll have to see where they end up getting adjusted. But
it's not the point where they need like small adjustments. Like they're the cream of the crop in S tier. I think they are head and shoulders above Orks and Necrons, and that's saying something. I don't expect these points to stay the same. I do think they'll get some sort of adjustment whenever this book officially releases. However, we're not talking about some slap on the wrist style adjustments. These rules are insanity. They need to pay for these rules. And I'm a little concerned that not every detachment is insanity for Tau. So it's going to be probably some units end up undercosted for the potential of being in the Monka detachment. And it's only after a few months of data that we're collecting that we'll understand that Monka is too strong. And then maybe we'll reel back their lethal hits or their rerolls or whatever it is. But that's going to take some time. And until that comes to be, we're going to have to accept our new robotic overlords.
It's going to be fun. But I still have not been allowed to play them at event yet, which is insane. I've been playing this.
I think it's mercy.
This book forever. I just want to play my Tau.
Warhammer's so healthy right now. Look at that tier list. We got a nice A tier, we got a nice B tier, no D tier. Why are you trying to make Tau also OP?
I don't want them to be OP. I just want them to be good, and they are good. So, overall, like I said, I think the biggest downside of the MFM is that for the bottom side of things, it just really didn't do anything for the armies that really are suffering right now. The unique armies that are really suffering. So I would like to see more targeted rules changes. Basically, all the ones down there, they don't need points decreases. They need rules changes. They need their rules to be effective.
It seems as though they keep trying to do this thing where they solve bad rules with cheaper points. And like that does not solve the problem. It just makes the unit palatable because it's ludicrously cheap.
Yeah.
And I would like to see more nuance in the rules changing system in terms of like let's fix the bad rules, not just make it really, really cheap.
I think we've seen it already a couple times now. I don't think that they should stick to this hard schedule of no rules changes, points changes, rules changes, points changes. You know, it's too static because their codex release schedule is so all over that you don't know when things are coming. And if my book comes out like right before or right after an update, it's going to be, you get the 3 months of data, and then they might not even make changes then. And I think that's the downside, and we've seen that with AtMech here.
I'm hoping with the addition of like Josh Roberts into the rules team and maybe some additions to the studio, they seem to be investing on that side of stuff, that the rules changes get developed a little bit more procedurally. I know in the beginning of 10th edition, they very much intended for the whole process to be every 3 months points, every other 3 months rules, points, rules, and alternation like that. And then the very beginning of the edition, they didn't follow that cadence because the game was a little bit on fire with all the resets. But now it's a lot more normalized, healthy, cyclical, and they're just maintaining the cadence they've always tried to. I think the cadence could use refinement, but it's nice to see that they are coming up with quarterly changes to the game, and like truly, what do we have? 80% of the armies, 70% of the armies in A and B tier. That is healthier than we have ever been. I've seen more team diversity lists. I've seen more singles diversity lists. The game is in a great spot. And it's not even at the point where S tier is so oppressive that nothing else even gets to show up.
It's not like an OG Eldar where it's just like, it's not
like Wraith Knights or go home. Like we get to play Warhammer, and that's like what it's all about.
Yeah, so I feel very good about the meta. I think it's clear what needs to be changed. Obviously, the 2 new books up at the top, that's our impression. You know, we'll see what the games played in the tournament scene, but I feel like they're at least on par with Necrons, in my opinion, based on playing them. So hopefully, you know, a couple months from now, we'll get some targeted changes and just keep everybody, you know, elevate the Bs a little bit, downgrade the A's just a little bit, get them all in that middle of A to B area.
I'm really looking at C tier. C tier needs some work.
Yeah, well, that was the first point. Yeah, it was like C tier just, they need rules changes, fundamental rules changes.
If we can like lower S tier, buff C tier, and the entire game somehow falls into A and B tier, that would be so awesome. That would be the dream right there. But
we're not far.
We're not far. We are closer than we've ever been. I think that's really exciting. So maybe some new missions will add some more shake up into it if that's on the horizon, hopefully. But if not, then we'll just have to make do with our balanced data slate changes where rules will change. And I think a lot of these challenges that Necrons and Tau and some of the C-tier codexes are facing, I think they could really work from some rules refinement instead of points decreases or whatever.
Yep. So hopefully we're in that direction. Overall, I feel really good about the meta as a whole, and just really happy that everybody's been joining us. Hope you enjoyed this analysis. Like I said, it's at the beginning of the meta, so it is very much, we're prognosticating into the future here, but basing it on our experiences in the games we played so far, and overall, just positive excitement because I've been enjoying 40k.
Warhammer's been great.
You just get to play games.
Yeah.
It is not like at the beginning of 10th edition, which is
super fun right now.
So much better.
And I think it's only going to keep on getting better as they get better at refining. We're into the real life cycle of the edition now. So the 10th, I think, is going to go and just become more and more enjoyable as time passes, which I'm super excited about. Hopefully you all agree, but I'm sure some of you disagree in the comments. If you agree, disagree, whatever, feel free to let us know. Please leave a comment in the video. Be nice, we have feelings too. We do take your feedback to heart. Hopefully this video sounds better, looks better, is better, there's no feet in it, all kinds of good stuff for you. And also, while you're here, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It is how we keep on doing this kind of content for you. We love producing it, we love helping the community grow to any capacity that we can, and you are the reason that we are able to. So thank you so much for all your support. If you want to support even more and you want to get better at the game, check out the link below, thewarroom.vhx.tv. It'll help you learn the game, become your best. We have content on every single faction of the game. We produce content every single day of the week, and we absolutely love doing it all for you, so please support the channel. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.
If you want to see some new MFM games, right after this is going to be a Dark Angels versus Necrons game using some of the new updated units. So we're going to be playing tons of new MFM games, and like I said, there was also that CSM versus Aeldar showing off some of those CSM decreases. So
absolutely,
if you want to check that out, check out the Worm.
Get in there, folks. Well, till then, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you later.
So long.